Chapter 2499. But he had no other way to get his memories. He could only observe her every day. She just had to act harmless and be nice to him. She didn't believe that the target of this strategy would not be moved. Just as she was thinking, she heard that the favorability level had increased to 15. Wei Wei narrowed her eyes. She was very calm, but she was not very proud. After all, this was all part of her plan, so it was natural that she would get the result. She dragged Shia to the stove and began to heat up some vegetable soup and toast some hot bread. Then she fed him little by little. Shia could eat, and he didn't have the problem of not swallowing things in his mouth. She pinched the bread into small pieces and gently touched his lips, then pressed it in with a little force. Her delicate fingertips lightly brushed against his thin lips, still carrying a hint of coldness. She carefully held the plate and used a spoon to spoon the vegetable soup seriously. Some meat was added to the vegetable soup. These meat were specially picked out by her and made for him to eat. Shia stared at her coldly. His eyes didn't move much, but the sense of scrutiny was very strong. At first, he suspected that she had a motive. After so many days together, he was sure that she really had no motive. Even when she wiped his body, she was meticulous and serious. But when she was done, her ears would always be unbelievably red. His face was also flushed red from the rush of blood. Although she came to kiss him presumptuously, she had never really used a profane method. She cherished it very much. It was as if a kiss could make her feel happy even if she was hungry or cold. What kind of mood was this? This was the first time Shia came into contact with this kind of person. He didn't understand. But the little witch was harmless, which caused him to not have the initial intention to kill her. Shia originally wanted to contact the people from the church, but the church's spy had not been caught. In his current situation, it was not suitable for him to appear immediately. After all, if he wanted to kill him, now was the best time. So Shia didn't move and continued to be a statue. After feeding Shia, she wiped his mouth. The thin skin of her fingertips rubbed against the beautiful lines of the young man's thin lips. It was like a casual touch, but it brought a slight numbness. Wei Wei calmly lowered her eyes, retracted her fingers, and then cleaned up the tableware. She herself had only eaten half a piece of bread, and her thin body was pitifully frail in her loose robe. When she held the plate and turned to wash it, the eyelashes of the youth on the chair, which were the same color as his hair, slowly moved. Then the grayish-purple eyes moved. It was a little difficult, but it was no longer like before, where it could only freeze. His eyes followed her back as she walked away. He watched her walk out. There was a very simple kitchen here, and the food inside was very varied. Shia felt that the pauper should be able to get enough food. If she had not been a witch, she would have been able to go to the Church of Light on Sundays and receive alms. If it was the bishop's birthday, he might even get some meat or a bag of potatoes. How could a witch be in such a miserable state? It also proved that she didn't harm anyone. This was because most of the witch's wealth came from harming people, poisoning people, and curses. Shia looked at her disappearing figure. Only then did he lower his beautiful eyes unhurriedly. His pale face was cold and indifferent. Only his thin lips were red and bewitching. He suddenly got up gently, as if he had slowed down a few beats, and moved to the side of the table. He looked at the leftover materials on the table. Chapter 2500. He gently reached out and infused some of the magic he had just accumulated. Then Shia sat back on the chair. He thought coldly, the little witch didn't kill anyone, so he couldn't be bothered to kill her. After all, it takes energy to kill. She's not worth it. The magic just now, I'll just treat it as a reward for dinner. In the future, don't think that I'll repay her for taking care of me these days. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Wei was sitting on a stool in the small kitchen, eating a meat bun in her hand. Although the family was poor, they still had money to buy food. However, being poor was also a means of conquering. If a person only had one bun and gave you 2/3, you would feel very touched. If a person had 100 pieces of bread and gave you 3, you would think that he was stingy. So to let Shia know that it wasn't easy for her, she deliberately showed that there was not enough food at home. But even if she starved herself to death, she would definitely let him eat his fill. Was he touched? Look, 20 favorability. He must be touched. Wei Wei Bai didn't dare to make sound, but she still couldn't help but laugh. Then she finished the meat bun and drank a few mouthfuls of vegetable soup before washing up. Wei Wei Bai, who was full, came out. She continued to make potions. The system had already told her that Shea had just infused magic into the materials with difficulty. She asked the system strangely, "Do you still remember how to use magic after losing your memory?" System, of course, in terms of magic skills, witches will definitely keep them in their recipes. Otherwise, what's the use of having a servant who can't use magic? Wei Wei Bai felt that it was right. It was logical and common sense. But why did he infuse magic into the materials? Wei Wei Bai was at a loss as she mixed the potions and found something amazing. All the potions were successfully mixed in one go. How could she just throw them around and succeed? This magic was too useful. Shaya could only see the side of the little witch's face, and from her expression, he saw that she was at a loss, then shocked, and finally happy. Her eyelashes were curled, and the joy in her eyes was exceptionally cute. Shaya's thin lips moved, and he couldn't help but curve, but he quickly suppressed it. Several of the lowest grade potions were successfully concocted. What's so funny? Back then, he didn't think it was a big deal when he made the holy water of the highest grade. Wei Wei Bai neatly placed the potion and happily ran over. She held Shaya's face with both hands and affectionately kissed him. Her eyes were filled with pure happiness as she smiled. "Shaya, I'm so awesome. This is the first time I've successfully concocted a potion. We could go sell it tomorrow." A trace of disdain appeared in Shaya's eyes. What was there to be happy about? The more powerful potions were just a small matter. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to sit on the young man's lap, smiling sweetly. "Once I've saved enough money, I'll hire a priest and we can get married." Get married? Wei Wei Bai gently wrapped her arms around his neck. Her light yellow eyes were incomparably clear, and they were filled with undisguised love. "Back then, you said you would marry me, but what I waited for was the news of your death." The tears in her eyes slowly filled her eyes. The girl cried silently, her lips tightly pursed. She hurriedly wiped her tears, but there were tears in the gaps between her fingers. The girl's voice was choked with sobs, and there was a forced smile. "I won't let you leave in the future. Even if the whole world stops us, I will be with you." Wei Wei Bai buried her face in his arms, trembling nonstop. And Shea, it was obviously fake, but she couldn't hide her feelings. There was also grief in his heart. It was all so real. Could it be that he really had amnesia, forgot about her, or did she recognize the wrong person? Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 2501. Wei Wei Bai, who was nestled in his arms, kept muttering. Why didn't the favorability increase? Did her acting skills deteriorate? Wei Wei Bai, who acted as an infatuated girl, made people suspect that she had amnesia. She didn't expect that the original owner of the body picked up the skeleton. It was a real person. The magic potion didn't have any effect. The brain had nothing to do with memory. But her grief succeeded in making this noble youth, who had always been calm and gloomy, doubt his brain for the first time. Wei Wei Bai waited and waited until she fell asleep, but she didn't see the favorability increase. This cold-hearted and heartless ghost, a normal person who had amnesia, even if their mind was blank. But at least there was sympathy, and people were very tolerant of people who loved them. Even if they didn't like them, they wouldn't hate them. Before he was sure of his memory, he saw that she was going to fight against the whole world for him. Shouldn't he show some appreciation? Wei Wei Bai, while sleeping, made a moral condemnation of the target's character. In the quiet room, there were all kinds of messy tables and chairs. Dried flowers hung on the walls, and the fire in the fireplace occasionally crackled. If it was in the past, this kind of place, Shaya couldn't tolerate his feet stepping into it. He sat quietly, and under his light-colored eyelashes, his grayish-purple eyes were unusually beautiful. His skin was as cold as snow, and under the light, there was a soul-stirring sense of paleness of a sick noble. The Grand Duke of Rose. Not only because he liked Rose, it was also because Duke Shaya's face was more exquisite and gorgeous than Rose. The Flower of the Empire was a title given to him in private by the most authoritative noble circle. Of course, there was another title, which was the Cold Arbiter. The aloof and chaste Duke had never shown mercy to any sinful and filthy things. Strict, cold, and emotionless. This made everyone in the Empire not dare to have a trace of covetousness towards him, even if his appearance was too shockingly beautiful. Shaya's lower gaze just happened to see her long and curly eyelashes. Because she was asleep, her eyelashes were quietly drooping. The delicate skin on her face was soft and tender under the dim yellow light. However, he still did not lose a single bit of color. She was as beautiful as the little angels in the court paintings. There was not a single trace of the witch's black on it. Even her brown hair was not dyed by black magic. Instead, this was his true nature. If it weren't for the witch's brand on her body, at first glance, he couldn't tell if she was a witch or not. Shaya was silent for a long time. The outline of the middle half of his face, hidden in the shadows, was surprisingly perfect. After an unknown amount of time, he finally moved. It was as if he was slowly breaking through the ice. His body also began to move slowly. First, his fingers trembled slightly. There was the arm. In the end, his slender fingers finally landed on the back of the girl in his arms. The thin back under his fingers made him frown. Then, he slowly hooked his arm around her waist and let her fall into his arms. The girl's long braids were messy. She had been taking care of him the whole day, but she couldn't take care of herself. Shaya calmly looked at her face for a long time. His purple eyes were still so dark that no emotions could be seen. Then he stretched out his other hand and gently lifted her hairband with his fingertips. The rough band fell to the ground. Her long, thick, and silky hair had already spread out. Slash. Chapter 25:02. Shaya's fingers carelessly brushed through her brown hair. It was slightly astringent, probably because she didn't have enough money to use good hair care ointment. Shaya pursed his thin lips. She had been fiddling with some beautifying potion all day. She had forgotten to use some for herself. In the past few decades, the empire had become stronger and wealthier. All women chased after the luxurious style of the noble circle. No woman would look down on her own face and hair. He narrowed his eyes lazily, and his fingertips came to her neck. Her breathing was still very steady. It seemed that she didn't have a trace of vigilance. How could she be so careless? As a witch, she lived in fear of being killed every day. No matter how weak a witch was, she would not be able to sleep well. Was she not afraid that she would be killed by the Church of Light in the middle of her sleep? Or was it because she had not been a witch for long, so she had not developed a sense of vigilance? Shaya thought of many possibilities, but suddenly found that her breathing had become a little heavier. Her face was also a little red. She seemed to be a little uncomfortable. His fingers were pressing on her, making it impossible for her to breathe. The youth's murderous, bloody hand trembled slightly. Then, as if he was afraid of crushing a piece of cake, he immediately let go. Wei Wei Bai's face immediately improved, and then she naturally buried her face in his arms again. She seemed to have practiced this posture thousands of times. If she had never been hugged like this before, her instinctive reaction would not be so practiced. Who would hug her like this before? Shaya stared at her silently for a long time. His eyes were still obscure and cold. Finally, he gathered his strength, and with a force of his arm, he pulled her directly into his arms. Her soft face was even closer to his chest. Her petite body was much lighter than a bird. Her arms and legs were too slender and fragile, as if he could break them with a little strength. Was this caused by malnutrition? Shaya stared at her sleeping face. Maybe it was not because she was not vigilant, but because she was hungry and tired. That was why she slept so soundly. Shaya's mood was very complicated for a moment. He stood up with difficulty and deliberately weighed her. She was really too light. It was obvious that this shabby house had once been glorious. At the very least, he wouldn't be poor all the time. The wood of the floor and the fireplace, all of them required a large amount of gold coins. Although there was only one room, there was a kitchen, a bathroom, and a balcony. This was unimaginable in a truly poor family. Moreover, the house was quite old, so it shouldn't have been built by the little witch. It was an old and dilapidated house, but one could see that the furnishings were not bad. It must be her mother or some female relative, a witch. And it was that relative who had put the witch mark on her. Maybe it started when he was very young. However, the little witch's aura did not reek of blood, nor did she have any traces of black magic. Her hair and eyes also proved that she was barely able to reach the entry level of black magic. Shaya carefully observed in his heart and finally walked into the room. The room was not big, and the bed was a single bed. He had been sleeping here all this time. The dry and warm bedding was specially dried by her. As for her, Shaya raised his eyes and looked at the recliner beside the bed. That was where she spent this period of time. Shaya's gaze stopped on the recliner for a long time before he finally slowly walked to the bedside. Chapter 25:03. He put her on the bed and pulled the quilt over her. These few simple actions had already made him sweat profusely. On his sweaty skin, there were a few illusions of golden scales. This was the process of digesting the holy dragon skeleton. The girl on the bed was sleeping peacefully. Her light red lips had a kind of delicate beauty in the dark. Her thick hair was spread out, so beautiful that she didn't look like a real person. Shaya quietly observed her for a while, then gently put his finger on her lips. The soft touch made his fingertips stiffen a little. Then he injected the magic power into her body. The magic could at least make her body better, otherwise she would have slept under the quilt for a whole night. Her hands and feet couldn't warm up. After the magic entered her body, her white cheeks blushed. Her skin wasn't cold anymore. Shaya pursed his thin red lips, and an inconspicuous smile appeared. Just take it as returning her care. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 25. Shaya ignored the importance he attached to a witch and didn't notice the faint pity in his heart. It made his heart beat faster. He had always been cold and strong and never cared about the small fluctuations in his heart. Shaya's footsteps were slow, and he continued to walk out of the room. Then, he began to check the room. He wanted to make sure that the little witch didn't want to lie to him. After all, she misunderstood him and resurrected him as a corpse and hugged him every day, saying that she loved him. That was already the biggest lie of all. He didn't think that he had really lost his memory. So, what was the little witch's purpose? Not long after Shaya left, Wei Bai opened her eyes onto the quilt. She had always been vigilant if she wasn't as tired as a dog. Usually, as long as there was any movement, she would wake up. At first, she did fall asleep, but when Shaya put her on the bed, she was almost awake. She called, "System, has the house been cleaned up?" The system, cleaned up. Cleaned up referred to the original owner's things in the house. She had read a lot of books in the house and found that the dark aura of witches came from the soul. Every time she cursed a person, the soul would emit a stench. Only those who trained in light magic would be able to smell it. After she came, she replaced the original master's soul, so her soul didn't have the aura of darkness. This meant that she had not harmed anyone. A person who had not harmed anyone, even if she was a witch. Then, for Shaya, who had lost his memory, it would definitely make him less vigilant. Cleaning up the house was to destroy some of the harmful things of the original owner, then put in some masculine things. Because these things were too trivial, the system was worried that it would make a mistake. He bought a house model from the supermarket. As long as he entered the desired state of the house, he could immediately change the furnishings of the house and deal with things that did not conform to the model. There were also a few more logical gadgets. For example, the male clothes in the wardrobe. No matter if it was new or old, they all fit Shaya. In some places that needed to be embroidered, the first letters of his name were embroidered. There were also small male things, some booklets with male handwriting, or annotated books. Right, there should be books on light magic as well. After all, Xiao was from the Church of Light. If Xiao flipped the house like this, the more he would believe her words. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her hand and pulled the quilt, then lay down on the bed and continued to close her eyes to rest. There shouldn't be any problems tonight. Chapter 2504. After all, Xiao had started to move. Although she was a witch now, she didn't have any witch abilities. She also couldn't put any witch restrictions on him so that he couldn't run away. Just 20 favorability. If this man had an especially rebellious personality when he was alive, even if he lost his memory, he wouldn't be willing to stay. If he wanted to run away, she didn't have the ability to stop him. Who asked her to be so bad? Wei Wei Bai sighed. If I knew, I wouldn't have asked for the #1 beauty. Light immunity would have been good. At least it was one of the magic talents. System. Now you're regretting. But since the host was regretting, the system could only share her depression. Actually, you can take it back. The #1 beauty can exchange for light immunity once. I'll exchange it for you now. There were some things in the supermarket that could be exchanged. Wei Wei Bai immediately smiled. No need to go through so much trouble. How can I accept it? The kind angelic system revealed a sinister smile. It's no trouble. For you, I'll enjoy any trouble. I'll exchange it for you. Wei Wei Bai, exchange, and we'll break off ties. System, damn host, did she have his feelings? If she threatened to break off ties again, he would listen. Meanwhile, Xiao had already slowly walked past some key areas. He also unhurriedly flipped through the books and took notes. At first, he didn't find anything harmful in the house. It was just some very basic witch's equipment, but they were all very cheap. The little witch should have inherited her relatives' things, but the important and expensive things were all taken away by the previous witch. She was left with these rubbish basic things, and it could be seen that she wasn't a qualified witch. Instead, she was a clumsy little girl who couldn't even be considered a witch, because she didn't even know how to use these basic things, even the unbelievably simple beautifying water. She could fail 8 or 9 times out of 10. Any ordinary person with a little bit of talent could defeat her. Xiao stood by the table, leaning against the old mahogany table. His purple eyes coldly stared at the thing on the table. It was an old pocket watch. The Empire's mechanical engineers didn't get much attention, but aristocratic things like clocks or mechanical bird cages were very popular. This is a man's pocket watch. Xiao's incomparably cold and pale face became even more noble and exquisite because of his silence. He stood for a while, then reached out with his fingertips, casually picked up the chain that was beginning to fade, and lifted the watch. Then his fingertips moved slightly and the pocket watch opened. The watch had lost its power. However, Xiao's eyes were fixed on the top of the pocket watch. It was an image. In such a small picture, the girl's smile was so beautiful that it was breathtaking. It was the little witch's. Xiao's expression turned cold, and a baleful aura began to emerge in his ice-cold eyes. This thing didn't seem to belong to the little witch's relatives. This was because the aura on it was the remnants of light magic. Furthermore, there was a beautiful letter S engraved on the inside of the embrace. Are they the initials of the owner's name? His initials were also S. But he knew that this thing was not his. Xiao expressionlessly threw the pocket watch back on the table and then continued to rummage through it. Then, like a chain reaction, he found more and more traces of man. And it was the same man. Some books of light magic that shouldn't be in a witch's house. They were very well preserved, and there were often annotations in a man's handwriting. It wasn't his handwriting, but it could be seen that it was a noble's slightly elegant grammar. Could this man be a noble? Learning light magic, noble, initials. He fit the description, but unfortunately, the handwriting wasn't his. Xiao's fingers flipped through a page of notes. His fingers paused slightly. A line of unfamiliar male handwriting appeared. Wei Wei, my love, I am willing to give up everything to be with you. Chapter 2505. So this man wasn't her father, uncle, or anything like that. He was her lover. He thought that she was lying to him, but he didn't expect that. She really had a lover, who loved her, and she treated him as a substitute for the man who wrote this line of words. Xiaoya's grayish-purple eyes stared at the line of words. He didn't know how long he stared at it, but he murmured and gritted his teeth. Wei Wei, was that her name? It was quite cute. It was just that her eyes weren't good, and she actually mistook him for her lover. If she knew that the man she used all her strength to revive was someone else, how desperate would that be? Thinking about it made him happy. Xiaoya raised his head and looked at a mirror that was casually placed on the ground. The mirror was gray, but he could see that the youth was wearing simple, commoner clothes, which were fitting but shabby. But there was still a trace of the youth's noble temperament. Xiaoya's purple eyes were cold and incomparably cold. He stretched out his hand, and his slender fingertips casually tugged at the button of his collar, revealing his exquisite collarbone. The rose-colored youth's thin lips curled up slightly, and his smile was indescribably evil and gorgeous. You want me to be a substitute, but you don't know if you can pay the price. She wanted Rose Duchess, whose hands were stained with blood, to be her substitute puppet, but it was very expensive. He murmured softly and repeated softly, Wei Wei. The dreamy sigh was gorgeous and tactful, but it was unusually cold. Wei Wei waited for the favorability notification. She waited and waited until she fell asleep. There was no favorability notification. She once again confirmed that Xiaoya was a stingy and cold person, even if she thought that the two of them were lovers before they lost their memories. He didn't feel guilty at all. Perhaps this skeleton's personality was particularly cold when he was alive. So no memories meant no feelings. Even if she believed that the two of them were lovers, it wouldn't increase the favorability. Because there was no favorability, she slept very bitterly. Her delicate brows were tightly knitted in her sleep. Her grievance was very obvious. The youth had almost used up his last bit of strength. He moved into the room with difficulty. He saw the girl in her sleep, biting her beautiful lower lip and frowning. A trace of grievance appeared at the corner of his eyes. She seemed to be thinking about that damned man who was already dead and rotting. Xiaoya quietly and indifferently stared at her for a good while. Under his honey-colored curly hair, his pair of grayish-purple eyes were so cold that it was penetrating. How similar was he to that man? Why would she admit her mistake? A trace of doubt flashed through Xiaoya's heart. But soon, because Wei Wei was sleeping too happily, she turned over and actually flipped half of her body out of bed. If she moved a little more, she would fall off the simple single bed. This interruption made the doubts in his mind disappear. He took a few steps forward with an expressionless face. Then, he gently reached out and hugged her. Finally, he put her down on the floor with the blanket. She slept deeply. Her small body was wrapped in the blanket like a cute sweet roll. Her fair face was still blushing comfortably due to the protection of the warmth magic. Xiaoya ignored her. He had used up the last of his strength. He lay on his side on the bed softly. Once again, he became a motionless statue. Wei Bai's soft breathing was the only sound in the dim yellow light. In the quiet night, he stared at the ceiling. There was actually spider silk. Chapter 2506. Originally, he wanted to let Wei sleep on the bed. After all, he had noble etiquette. It was fine for a man to give in to a woman. But now he didn't. After all, the man she wanted to take care of wasn't him. Well, in the future, she dared to ask him to repay her for taking care of him. Dream on. Then, Wei laid on the floor comfortably and slept through the night. When she woke up, she was speechless. The system told her what happened last night. She didn't know what the male lead was thinking. She could only roughly repeat what the male lead did. She looked through the house and searched for key items, proved that she was smart and cautious. But after looking at the evidence of love between the two of them, why did he throw her on the floor? Could it be that he hated being a bootlicker? Wei felt that it was very possible. After all, he had seen that he had written a love letter to her, every single word. Anger rose in her heart. She felt that she was too useless in the past. Loving a woman so much might go against his character. So the favorability didn't increase? Wei looked deeply at the youth lying on the bed. Then, she changed her expression. She touched her head blankly and got up from the floor. She looked at Shea blankly with her head full of fluffy hair. Why am I sleeping on the floor? Did I carry Shea to bed last night? She muttered a few doubtful words. She floated over lightly. Then, Wei Bai didn't seem to be too conflicted. She began to wash Shea's face and hands seriously. He quietly lowered his eyes, indifferent. She was like a delicate and cold doll. Wei Bai didn't care. She felt that it was good to have a relationship that lasted a long time. And after experiencing the previous world, she didn't think that there was another world that could last as long as the previous one. So even if she felt that Shea's face was very bad, Wei Bai was still happy to finish feeding him. Then, she said to him, "Then I'll go sell the potion, Shea." Shea was speechless. If he couldn't sell it, he would be caught. Shea sat quietly, ignoring her completely. Wei Bai pushed him to the window and opened it to let him bask in the sun. Then, she changed into a hooded robe that ordinary people wore and went out to sell things with a small basket. Shea heard the door close. The little witch's cheerful footsteps gradually disappeared. Wei Bai, who was outside, said calmly, "The smell is far away. I took care of him every day, so he took it for granted. I can't raise him to become an ingrate. I have to let him know that I'm very important." The system said, "Yes, yes." Wei Bai said, "Remember to pay more attention to your family." The system replied, "Yes, yes. Wait." He couldn't see clearly from such a distance. "Fuck your Yixin dog." A lonely room, a decaying house. Without the little witch, even the sunlight was gloomy. This was the atmosphere of a normal witch's house. However, when the little witch was around, he didn't feel any aura of darkness or evil. Xiao pursed his lips and coldly lowered his head. He didn't know how much time had passed, but it was already noon. The little witch still hadn't returned. Xia patiently waited, but the sun had already begun to set. The little witch was still nowhere to be seen. He had already changed his position a few times. His current position was lazily leaning against the back of the chair, his fingers carelessly resting on the armrest. His face was facing the shabby wooden door, his eyes cold, and his posture strong and cold. He almost stared a hole in the door. Afraid of wasting too much magic, he didn't put any tracking devices on the little witch. Chapter 25:07. Could it be that she was taken away by the patrol team? Thinking of the little witch's face, he knew that in recent years, the group of people in the noble circle no longer cared about overly gorgeous and strong beauty. Instead, they pursued the appearance of a fair and innocent child like an angel. This group of people was used to seeing things that were too gorgeous. In their eyes, Yinli was like a colorful, rotten, and ugly food. And the little witch's face was like a beautiful and pure light. It was enough to make a large number of nobles go crazy for her. Could it be that some blind little noble took a fancy to her? After all, she was so weak. If she was taken a fancy to, she couldn't struggle even if she was taken away. Every noble, no matter good or bad, always had a mage by their side. And with the little witch's terrible ability, not to mention the lowest level mage, even if a few ordinary men swarmed her, she couldn't handle it. Xiao was already impatiently holding his face with his hand. His cold eyes began to show sharp irritation. If she didn't come back, he was going to leave. He didn't care about her life or death. Anyway, she was a witch. A few more died or were ruined by someone. There were only benefits and no disadvantages for him. Xiao patiently tapped the armrest of the chair with his fingers. Damn it, she went out to play. She forgot about him. She didn't care if he was hungry. Thinking of this, the delicate and sarcastic youth coldly curved his thin red lips. That's right, he was just a wrong substitute she picked up. She picked up the wrong bone and brought him back by mistake. She had always regarded him as her lover. So stupid, so blind, to be able to live so long. Xiao's cold heart, for no reason, surged with a ball of suppressed anger. This uncontrollable state of mind. It made him frown, and his pale eyelashes trembled. Xia got up and was about to leave and not come back. The familiar sound of footsteps could be heard, and the little witch's happy, singing voice. The sweet and sticky little tune was especially tantalizing. Shaya's cold expression was a little strange. He almost instinctively sat on the chair, then remembered that he had moved the chair. Shaya's fingers used force, turned the chair back, and put it by the window. Then, he breathed a sigh of relief and continued to sit like a corpse. His face was slightly lowered, thin lips soft. The young man, who was as beautiful as a rose, still managed to successfully play dead one day. Wei Wei Bai held the empty basket, listening to the system talk about things at home. There was no problem. Just now, Shaya moved the chair by himself, as if he didn't dare to let her know. As if he could move. Bai Weiwei felt that this was also in line with common sense. After all, this was a person with amnesia. He must be very vigilant. So he played dead and then step by step to check the surroundings. After confirming that she was telling the truth and that there was no danger, only then would he return to normal. Bai Weiwei nodded. She deliberately ignored the stalker behind her. He also wanted to make Shaya feel a sense of crisis. Otherwise, if she kept sitting like this, the favorability would not change. A beauty saving a hero, although it was an old story. But it was useful. That mage probably took a fancy to her beauty. After all, she just went out and saw a woman. All of them had rough skin. Chapter 25:08. She wondered if it was because the place she went to was too poor. Even if she was a young girl, her skin was dull. It burned her eyes. She used her face as a signboard and easily sold the potion. After all, her skin was as white as a light bulb. She was a living advertisement. So those women, even if they hesitated, still bought it in the end. And that low-level mage seemed to be passing by. Then he showed a greedy look. Wei Wei Bai was very sensitive to this kind of malicious look, but she did not bat an eyelid and lured him over. System, but he's going to molest you later. The male lead should be the one to save you. After all, the male lead could already move. Wei Wei Bai looked indifferent. No, Shaya's appearance is much better than mine. Since that mage likes beauty, he'll definitely hug Shaya first. System. Finally, it struggled to refute. They're both men. Wei Wei Bai. Men? Is there a problem? System. Okay, there was no problem. The host's brain circuit had always been so fresh, abstract, and twisted. Wei Wei Bai. So when he molests Shaya later, I'll use a kitchen knife to kill the mage. She had asked around. Mages were close combat trash. As long as he was not allowed to chant, he would be chopped to death by a kitchen knife in minutes. System. As long as you're happy. The host's bold plan was not just once or twice. He was used to it. Wei Wei Bai came to the door and immediately put on a pure and sweet smile. She opened the door and excitedly walked in, even forgetting to lock the door. She ran to the window and happily spread her hands. Shaya, look, we have money. Shia, who was pretending to be a corpse, fixed his gaze on her slender fingers. Dozens of iron coins appeared in her palm. This money was enough for 2 days of food. Shaya's gaze paused as he saw the dirt on her fingertips. It was just a small amount of money, but for some reason, he felt a strange sourness in his heart. It was a little uncomfortable. However, it wasn't just uncomfortable. He kept his composure and lowered his eyes, still not revealing any flaws. However, he couldn't help but think that she had been running around outside all day. He wondered how she had managed to sell those potions. Could it be that they were begging one by one? Thinking of this, Shaya could hardly control himself and pursed his thin lips. Wei Wei Bai had already happily placed the iron coins on the table. She chirped like a cute little bird. I'll work hard to save money to buy you new clothes. Winter is starting to get cold. You'll need a hat and a scarf. Her back was to him. He finally couldn't help but turn a look at her. He saw her running around happily. The pair of iron coins on the table was exceptionally dazzling. Meanwhile, Wei Wei Bai had already rushed to the kitchen. I can't come back at noon. I'm sorry to keep you hungry. I'll cook for you right away. Shaya couldn't help but follow her back. His stifled breathing finally relaxed a little. Then, he looked at the metal coins. He had worked so hard to earn them. Not only did she have to support him, but she also had to save clothes and scarves for him. Didn't she think that he didn't even have thick clothes to protect himself from the cold? He looked at the wardrobe. In the little witch's wardrobe, Most of the men's old clothes were preserved, but it could be seen that they were old. As for her clothes, there were only a few pieces. And in the wardrobe, under some of the clothes, there was a list of pawns. She pawned all of her expensive and better-looking clothes, thinking of the resurrection potion that had no effect on him. Perhaps for the little witch, she had to go bankrupt to gather the materials. With her incomparably trashy concocting technique, it was estimated that she had wasted a lot of materials to succeed. Shaya's incomparably cold eyes were a little puzzled. He was used to seeing selfish people, the little witch's spirit of sacrificing everything for love. He had never seen it before. That man, how good was he to be worthy of her treatment? Shaya's eyelashes suddenly moved and immediately lowered again. Wei Bai had already walked out with dinner, which was much more sumptuous than last night. Shaya, it's time to eat. Shaya sat quietly, and his eyes didn't tremble in the slightest. She fed him meat soup, still full of smiles. I will take care of you, Shaya. Shaya's lips trembled, and the light in his eyes finally fluctuated a few times. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 30. // to facilitate the next reading, you can click on. Chapter 2509. She heard the favorability prompt. Wei Bai's smile became even more brilliant. Aya, Shaya's little corpse's reaction is slow. The favorability is rising so slowly, it's obvious that he's a slow person. Maybe it's because he's been dead for too long. His brain lacks oxygen, resulting in his brain not working well. The favorability can't rise quickly. So, little by little, there will occasionally be a surprise. That was the right way to go about it. Wei Bai lowered her eyes, trying to make the minced meat more finely. Like an old mother feeding a mentally disabled child, she showed it to the fullest. Her beautiful fingers, because of holding the spoon so tightly, turned white. Shaya's frozen gaze fell. He looked at it expressionlessly. Then, he heard a series of footsteps that clearly harbored ill intentions. It's the aura of a fire mage, and it's a very low-level one. Why is there a mage here? Is it his enemy? No, he doesn't have such a low-level enemy. Or is it the little witch's enemy? It's just her first day selling things, and she's already attracted such a person with bad intentions. The youth's cold purple eyes turned gloomy, because he already smelled a faint, sweet fragrance in the air. This is a cheap aphrodisiac. Why use this? Wei Bai was still smiling. The system notified that the mage had arrived. She immediately tidied up the plates. Shaya, I'm going to wash the plates. I'll come out later to wash your face. She treated him as if he was a big, cute doll. Shaya didn't say anything. He didn't even move his gaze. Wei Bai went to put the plates to let the mage in. While she was at it, she went to the kitchen to find a knife. Wei Bai weighed the tools in the kitchen. Although the meat knife was thin, it was sharp. So, Wei Bai held the meat knife and said to the system, as long as the mage comes in and shows a trace of bad intentions towards Shaya, you tell me. She immediately rushed out. The beauty saved the youth. The system nodded. In the living room, Shaya lazily raised his eyelids. There was a cold and cruel aura in her eyes. Her purple pupils gave off a bloody and gorgeous feeling. The beautiful young man finally turned his head slightly. His calm eyes stared at the door. The door swayed slightly. Then it was opened. Shaya narrowed his eyes dangerously. It seemed that he was not an enemy, but a piece of trash coveting the little witch. The cheap sweet smell in the air. He pursed his lips coldly. It was too disgusting. That low-level fire magician had already walked in with a face full of determination. When he saw Wei Bai for the first time, he was stunned. He had never seen such a pure and beautiful girl before. Her skin was as white as snow in early winter. Those beautiful eyes were like a gem in the hands of a noble. Such a young girl could be auctioned off for a sky-high price in the aristocratic circle. As soon as he saw her, he became greedy. As long as he caught her, he would be rich. He could also rely on this wealth to advance to become an intermediate mage. If he was lucky, he might even gain the favor of a great mage and enter the circle of mage nobles. The mage revealed a wretched smile. The sweet fragrance in the air would make the girl lose her strength. Moreover, She could not resist the touch of a man. Before selling her, of course, he had to taste it himself. When he walked in, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. The air was a little suffocating. He saw a young man sitting on a chair by the window. / to TXT download to read the. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the. Chapter 25:10. This young man was so beautiful that it was hard to distinguish his gender. If it was the girl just now, the purest snow in early winter, then this young man was simply the most gorgeous rose. The beauty of both of them was another kind of extreme perfection, and this young man's beauty had a terrifying feeling of sharpness. But was it an illusion? Why did he feel like he had seen this young man before? The mage frowned strangely, but he didn't think too much about it. After all, he found two beautiful young men and women at once. His future was bright. He grinned and was about to reach out his hand. Suddenly, he couldn't breathe. The mage was horrified to find that his face was covered by a thin golden paper. This was light magic. At the lowest level, the light spots condensed into a ball. But this young man's control skills were in the realm of God. He condensed the simple light spots into a piece of light paper. He tried his best to remove the golden paper from his face, but it was useless. Light had no substance. He couldn't even feel the weight of the paper. But he couldn't breathe. He reached out his hand and tried to use hand gestures to attract the flames. Unable to speak, the gestures were much more complicated, but he couldn't move his fingers. A few golden chains bound him. Just like that, the exquisite and beautiful young man sat quietly on the chair. He muttered in a low voice, "Are you going to use flames? That won't do. The little witch is so poor. If you burn something, won't she be heartbroken?" After saying that, the young man gently snapped his fingers. Then his thin red lips said softly and elegantly, "Destroy, disgusting criminal." The golden rays of light suddenly dispersed. The mage's body was also broken into light spots. All of a sudden, a human-shaped light spot appeared. It was a human figure struggling in incomparable pain. Then it began to fade away. Not a trace was left. When the light spot landed, Shaya's cold purple eyes suddenly constricted, because he saw that at the kitchen door. Wei Bai was carrying a knife. She seemed to have heard something and came out to see, but he didn't make any sound. He didn't give the criminal a chance to speak. The whole process should have been silent. Why did she hear it? And Wei Bai and the system. She was waiting for the mage to come in and show a covetous expression at Shaya. She was ready to rush out, but when she walked out of the kitchen, she saw a struggling light spot human figure being destroyed. That scene was too shocking, too strange and gorgeous. As a result, Bai Weiwei held the knife and forgot to rush to the rescue. But when she bumped into Shaya's body and moved, the quiet house, the disappearing criminal, the gorgeous young man was still sitting on the chair. Instead, it made the little witch look rather pitiful. It was to the point the scene was awkward. Shaya was stiff for a long time before his fingers finally fell on the armrest of the chair. Then he looked down coldly, although the power of the Saint Bone had not been completely digested. But it was more or less enough for him to divide his magic power to move around. Therefore, he did not need the little witch to take care of him. Shaya pursed his lips and gently raised his eyelashes. A trace of sober choice appeared in his silent and cold purple eyes. It was time to say goodbye to her, even though her care wasn't necessary. And she obviously thought of him as someone else. But it was fine to give her some money before she left. At https://www.sashu.com/ to read the full article at https://www.sashu.com to txt download at https://www.sashu.com to read on the phone at https://m/sashu.com/ for the convenience of your next reading. You can click on. Chapter 25:11. Just take it as a gift to this poor little girl. After Shaya made up his mind, he slowly got up and casually tugged at the rough collar of his clothes. His every move had a hint of casual elegance. His eyes also started to become unusually cold and domineering. I am Shaya West, the Duke of the Empire, blah blah blah. A choked sob of disbelief interrupted his magnificent self-introduction. Shaya, you can move? Tears of excitement welled up in Wei Wei Bai's eyes. Her fingers loosened, and the knife fell to the floor. Shaya was stunned and was about to explain. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps forward and hugged his waist with tears all over her face. Her whole body trembled, and her voice broke. You're alive. You're finally alive. I finally saved you. Shaya could feel her tears soaking through his shirt in front of his chest. After the warm tears left her eyes, they became abnormally cold. Shaya even felt that he was a little cold. Bai Weiwei's hands gripped the clothes around his waist, her fingertips turning white from exertion. She accidentally exposed Shaya's lie. Who knew if he would fly into a rage out of humiliation and run away? She had to catch him first. To catch him, she had to think of a reason to rush over and hug him. It was all because she was too slow, and the plan to save the beauty was ruined. Bai Weiwei eagerly raised her eyes. Her eyes were filled with clear and joyful tears. It was as if she had found a treasure that she had lost for many years. The feeling of regaining what she had lost made her unable to suppress her feelings. Her lips trembled with excitement, and she cried and hiccuped. I lost you for so many days, I even felt like dying. Shaya's cold purple eyes looked at her without saying a word. It was as if he was indifferent. Wei Wei Bai didn't care at all and hugged him intimately. Like an obedient kitten, she rubbed against his chest and said obediently, I've been protecting myself well, waiting for you to come back, Shaya. Shaya tried to open his mouth a few times, but he was interrupted by her sobbing. Her voice was soft and resolute. It's good that you're awake. If you want to leave next time, take me with you. If you die, take me with you. Shaya stood straight, still not saying anything. Did she not realize that she had mistaken him for someone else? Was she really blind? Or did she refuse to admit that the man she loved was already dead? Furthermore, she did not mention at all the sacrifices she had made to make the resurrection potion, not to mention the care she had given him during this period of time. This made him think that she wanted to use the method of repaying a debt of gratitude to blackmail his Grand Duke Rose. He was at a loss. Could it be that, in this world, there was really someone who loved someone without caring about anything in return? This kind of love that burned into his heart and drilled into his bones. It was as turbulent as a hurricane. Shaya didn't know how to deal with it at all. Now he was telling her that she had the wrong person and that the man was dead. Was she going to die with him? Thinking of this, Shaya frowned uncomfortably. He reached out to push her away. Wei Wei Bai had already let go of his clothes. She hurriedly reached out to wipe her tears. After wiping her eyes until they were red, she opened her rabbit eyes timidly and revealed a cute smile. Welcome back, Shaya. Her eyes, which were full of traces of crying, were shining brightly at this moment. Shaya choked on the words in his mouth again. / to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click. Chapter 25:12. He had clearly made up his mind to find an opportunity to tell her coldly and indifferently. She had mistaken him for someone else. The man she wanted was already dead, although he didn't know how she picked him up in his undead state. Her casual treatment was an exceptionally shameless and despicable act. His identity was as different as heaven and earth from hers. She used him as a puppet substitute. He would not let such a serious crime of blasphemy against the nobles of the empire go easily, until she realized what she had done wrong and sincerely knelt down to repent. This was the revenge he wanted from the beginning. Wei Wei Bai suddenly put her hands behind her back and raised her head. Her soft hair fell behind her shoulders. She pursed her bright red lips, and her thin white face was dyed with a beautiful blush. Where's the kiss of return? Shaya looked at her expressionlessly, but there was a strange emotion in his eyes. Kiss of return? Wei Wei Bai tilted her head. There were still traces of tears in the corners of her eyes, but her smile was more beautiful than a garden full of roses. You said that the first thing you would do when you came back was to kiss me. Shaya's quiet purple eyes stared at her, just like that. He didn't speak and didn't show any emotion. It was as if he was really a puppet, just standing up. Wei Wei Bai's eyes which were full of anticipation and laughter, gradually showed a trace of gloominess. Her smile also stiffened a little. As if sensing her decadence, she immediately reached out and patted her face. Then she said happily, "It's okay. You can know me first. I don't mind." She didn't seem to want him to see her pain at all, so she tried her best to look energetic. She didn't want to burden him. Shaya saw her drooping eyelashes and deep disappointment in her eyes. But the corners of her mouth were still curled up. It was as if others couldn't see her fear and discomfort. It was because his reaction wasn't right. So she started to be afraid. Was there something wrong with him? Shaya didn't know what was wrong with him. He felt that the little which was more pleasing to the eye when she was happier. Didn't he go out to sell the potion today and get a few days' worth of food expenses? Although that was something that could be bought with food expenses. It was so shabby that he didn't like it. But she always left the meat for him to eat. For the poor little witch, this was already the best she could do to support him. The girl hesitantly rubbed her feet against the floor. Then, she tried to make her voice sound more energetic. "You know what, Shaya? I sold something today and have money. When I have enough money, we will leave this place and be together forever." Speaking of being together, she seemed to have thought of something, and tears welled up in her eyes again. Shaya saw that she was trying hard to raise her spirits so that he wouldn't see her suffering, but she was also pretending that she wasn't feeling well. His tears were about to flow again. He sighed in annoyance. Then he reached out and snapped his fingers. The surroundings brightened and warmed up. Wei Wei Bai looked up strangely, seemingly a little surprised. When she looked up, a fair and slender finger lifted her chin with strength and elegance. The youth had already lowered his head. His lips were as red as a rose, and beneath his pale eyelashes was a pair of cold purple eyes. They were filled with indifference and suppressed helplessness. He kissed her, a restrained, courteous kiss. But with the breath of his thin lips, it was strong and slightly cold. Wei Wei Bai's eyes widened, but she didn't have time to feel anything. He had already taken a step back and retracted his delicate fingers. The handsome youth, with a cold and noble temperament, in the warm and bright room. His voice sounded indifferent and seductive. Return kiss. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Chapter 25:13. The room was full of light. At this moment, he was as dark as a demon. Then he smiled, and for the first time, his extreme beauty was revealed in front of the girl. "Don't be so unguarded in the future, or my temper won't be as good as this time. If there was a next time, he might really do something irreparable to her." Just as he finished speaking, the youth's finger moved in the air. The light suddenly burned. Not a single flame touched the furniture, but the sweet fragrance in the air was completely swept away by the burning power. Soon, the wind outside blew in. It blew away the loose hair in front of Shaya's forehead, revealing the youth's stunning purple eyes. His face was still flushed red. His breathing was also a little messy. Then he stretched out his fingers and pressed on her neck. He found that her skin was still hot. Shaya half closed his eyes and leaned forward, touching her forehead with his forehead. He whispered bewitchingly, "Sleep, my girl." Wei Wei Bai's eyes were still confused, and she was in a trance for a moment. Unable to resist his magic power, she slowly closed her eyes and finally fell asleep. The youth still maintained the posture of leaning forward and pressing his fingers on her neck. He saw that she was sleeping peacefully. The sweetness in the air was also gone. His rationality finally returned a little. Shaya lightly breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had just fought a battle. But his heart was still beating fast. Then he finally bent down and picked her up. His movements were extremely gentle, as if he was holding a feather or as if he was holding his treasure. Ding. The male lead's favorability is 45. After covering Wei Wei Bai with a blanket, Shaya took a deep look at her sleeping face before he turned around and walked out. He was worried that he couldn't suppress his impulse and did something worse than a beast. As he walked, he buttoned his collar, until the last button was meticulously buttoned, almost to his Adam's apple. Then he came to the window. After a while of the cold wind, he finally suppressed his accelerated heartbeat and the burning of his skin. Shaya didn't check the whole room last time. This time he continued to check, although the little witch wasn't harmful. However, her witch mother might have left some traps behind. Also, he wanted to take a look. The man who had the same initials as him, and was also a noble. Who was it? As long as they were nobles, he would recognize them. If they didn't recognize him, then it meant that his territory was too small and not worth mentioning. Several noble names that started with his flashed through his mind, but none of them matched this man's profile. Could it be that he was really a poor and worthless nobleman? Shaya unhurriedly flipped through the important books in a planned manner. At first, he only saw some of the books that the man annotated. From the looks of it, his magic talent was decent. Of course, he was still a far cry from him. With a harsh and cold attitude, Shaya examined the information. Then, he checked the things again, some of the more dangerous small objects. It should have been left behind by the little witch's mother. He casually used light magic and turned it into light before disappearing into thin air. The little witch didn't know how to use these things, and they might even hurt her. Destruction was the best. Shaya also saw some men's things, such as cufflinks and noble corsage for men. There were also some small gemstone decorations. These things could actually be used to repay debts and allow him to live a good life. But it seemed that the little witch didn't have this concept. She just left them there and didn't touch them at all. How foolish of him. She was already dead. Why not pawn these things and use them to take up space? Shaya wanted to destroy them, but he felt that he was too narrow-minded. After all, these things weren't his. Of course, he accidentally crushed a few of them, but that was an accident, right? When he was almost done searching, he casually picked up a book. It was a beginner witch book. Shaya casually flipped through it. He saw the little witch's handwriting. The handwriting was very slender, but it was very standard. He thought that he would see the witch's magic notes, but the first sentence was, "Shaya, I like you so much. Today is another day of loving you deeply." Sha and Wei Bai, who was sleeping, was having a beautiful dream. Shaya didn't like to be a bootlicker, right? Then let her write a confession full of words. It would be best to create evidence that she was the one chasing after him. Let him find this evidence by himself. He would definitely feel refreshed, unusually happy. Then her favorability would continue to rise. Shaya read the beginner witch's notes again. No wonder the witch's magic was so bad. It turned out that when she was studying, she was thinking about how to pursue a man. Shaya expressionlessly squeezed the book and crushed it little by little. She really is a bad student who doesn't like to study. Chapter 25:14. Wei Bai squatted on a small stool with a strange expression on her face as she looked at the fire. Gravy was simmering on the fire. She weighed some seasonings in her hands. The food of the poor in this plane was very, very simple. The seasonings were just salt and a little bit of spice. The effect of her work was very good. She ate it herself and felt that the taste was not bad. See, didn't you not have a stomachache? When she was about to put the seasonings into the broth, the system stared at her like a tiger watching its prey. Just put it down like this. Yes, you don't have to do anything, just throw in like this. Wei Bai casually threw in. The broth glowed with a faint blue light. The system looked at the pot of broth. Fortunately, the host had been eating bread. The broth was rarely drunk, although the ingredients were too simple. So the broth didn't have any strange changes. But the taste was definitely not good. The host also ate very little, so the tragedy of diarrhea did not happen. Fortunately, the male lead ate it. Wei Bai finished cooking and brought out the bread, broth, and some dried meat. The bread was bought, and the dried meat was not needed. It was just that the broth took a little longer. As the witch's little wife, Wei Bai walked out with a smile. "Shaya, it's time to eat." Walking out of the kitchen, she saw the young man standing by the table, lightly touching the oil lamp with his fingertips. Whoosh! The light was bright. This was not a flame that an oil lamp could have. It was a blessing of light magic. In the light, the young man's eyes under his eyelashes were as rich and deep as violets. He looked up at her unhurriedly. He saw Wei Bai happily putting the food on the table like a happy little bird. She had a ponytail and wore a simple dress, just like any other girl from a normal family. She was doing the housework. This feeling was very novel. because the place where he lived was dazzling and there were all kinds of servants. He had never seen such a life. Shea reached out and lit the candle unhurriedly. Some were incomplete, some were short, and some were even used to the point where there was only one core left. They were all lit up. There was no need to use candles or oil lamps themselves. All of them were light magic. It looked like flames, but it was actually light. In an instant, the room was incomparably bright. The flames in the fireplace started to burn automatically. The warm and cozy house was like thousands of happy families. After setting up the lamp, Shea gracefully walked to the table. He extended his long arm and pulled a chair over. Then he said to Wei Wei, "Bye, sit. Ladies first." This was the tradition of the nobles, although he had never followed it. Regardless of whether it was a man or a woman who would dare to take precedence in front of him, it was a provocation to him. This made it clear to everyone that Xiaya was the least gentlemanly person in the aristocratic circle. First of all, no one would be able to sit on it. Wei Wei Bai sat down in a daze. The other party's attitude was too strong. His words were like an order. As Wei Wei Bai, who walked the path of a long-term and heartwarming strategy, she had already confirmed that her character was gentle and affectionate. As long as the side quest isn't too much, don't think about that little bitch. It comes as soon as he thinks about it. It simply makes people gnash their teeth in hatred, but they can't bite it. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before she heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was no reminder. Shea had already sat across the table. The table was very small, and the two of them sat facing each other. He didn't even need to stretch out his hand to touch her fingertips. This was the smallest table he had ever used. Shea calmly scooped up the meat soup with a spoon and put it into his mouth. Slash. Chapter 25:15. His sense of taste had not recovered yet. Previously, he had been eating whatever she fed him. Sometimes, after eating, he would feel uncomfortable, but he would be fine after using healing magic. After all, he was very sure that the food was not poisonous. If it was, it would not escape his magic check. Perhaps it was because the power in his body was still being digested, which caused the discomfort. Wei Wei Bai felt very good about her cooking skills. The cooking methods of this plane reminded her of the minimalist cuisine of the British Empire in reality. So she followed suit, and it was actually edible. To her, this was simply crying tears of joy. Like a child eager to be praised, she looked at Shea with shining eyes. "Is it delicious, Shea?" Shea paused. What should he say? He couldn't taste it at all, but he saw that the corners of the girl's eyes were red and beautiful, as if the stars had fallen into her eyes. She actually looked so. A strange emotion surged in his heart, causing his breathing to become heavier once again. He said indifferently, "It's delicious." Although he was talking about food, his eyes were fixed on her smile. He thought of the scumbag who had followed her. This kind of scumbag would not be cut off. With such a beautiful face, any man who saw it would not be able to escape. Thinking of this, Shea frowned. Of course, he was an exception. He was still at the stage of watching a play. He wanted to see if one day he got tired of this substitute game. He would directly tell her that she had mistaken him for someone else. Her expression must be very beautiful. Shea thought darkly. Letting him be a substitute, this kind of sin, he would not let her have an easy time. As for how to make it difficult for her, the Duke who had used all kinds of cruel methods to deal with a bunch of criminals. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. There were many ways to make it difficult, not necessarily torture. He calmly and childishly suppressed his doubts and continued to eat the meat soup. His body felt a little uncomfortable again. Besides looking a little ugly, there should be no problem with the meat soup. The Duke calmly cast a healing light magic on himself. His body recovered. Then he continued to eat. Wei Wei Bai was eating bread. The system advised her not to eat too much meat soup. After all, meat soup is expensive. We have to pretend to be poor and pitiful. Show Shea. You eat bread, and he eats meat. The more good she was to him, the more her favorability would increase. Wei Wei Bai agreed. Of course, she would never admit that the broth tasted bad. After all, she was the one who made the food that was edible. She had a very good filter. He felt that his culinary skills had improved. When she returned to reality, she would cook for her family and show them how outstanding she was. Both parties were satisfied with the meal, although one of them basically didn't eat, and the other had lost his sense of taste. After dinner, Wei Wei Bai cleaned up the table and picked up the ingredients she bought to make the beautifying water. She was sure that there would be a market for her beauty lotion. The first time was harder to sell, but the second time was easier. Because it was really effective, and for effective beauty products, it was impossible for them not to sell. It took time to develop feelings in this plane. How could he survive if he didn't have more skills to earn money? As for Xiaya, he looked like an aristocrat when he was alive. Commonly known as the kind of person whose brain is not necessarily developed and whose limbs are definitely not diligent. What would he do to make money? And because the information was incomplete, Wei Wei Bai was worried that she would take him out. If she met his acquaintances or family members or something, it would be troublesome. Chapter 25:16. Wei Wei Bai was absent-minded for a moment, so she used a little strength in her fingers. Seeing that the material was about to be scrapped again, hooking her waist with one hand, the boy gently bent down and stretched out his other hand from behind to hold her fingers. His fingertips exerted force, and a trace of magic fell into the material. The scrapped material miraculously became intact, and soon the beautifying water was done. His voice sounded in her ear. In the future, when making things with magic, you must be completely focused. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything. Xiaya thought that she couldn't hear clearly, so he couldn't help but patiently repeat. Don't be distracted. This was her bad habit. Otherwise, she wouldn't have scrapped so many materials. Wei Wei Bai blinked, and her face turned red. Her voice was low and muffled. Xiaya frowned. What's wrong? Wei Wei Bai murmured. You are by my side. I can't concentrate. This sentence was very quiet. Xiaya listened attentively and realized what she meant. His fingers stiffened, and the girl's slender body was almost held in his arms. The tip of his nose smelled the familiar sweet fragrance of her body. This kind of contact was indeed very intimate and natural. Xiaya's face was also red, but he still calmly said, If you can't concentrate, then don't concentrate. With that, he let go of her fingers and pulled her arm instead. Taking her out of the chair, he sat down in a natural manner. Then Xiaya bowed his head, and his hands quickly and accurately began to make the beautifying water she wanted. I'll do it. Just look at the fire. If it's going to go out, remember to add firewood. Indeed, there was nothing he wanted her to do. The fire was added with magic, and it couldn't be extinguished all night. This was just a reason he wanted her to continue to not concentrate and think about him. Wei Wei Bai immediately nodded, and then obediently looked at the fire. For this kind of beautifying water, Xiaya casually made it, and his distraction was more powerful than Wei Wei Bai's. But because of the difference in magic, there was basically no possibility of failure. Xiaya quickly made a beautifying lotion and casually looked up. She saw that Wei Wei Bai was really looking at the fire obediently. She didn't even look at him. He casually made another beautifying lotion. However, Wei Wei Bai continued to stare at the fire obediently. She was so obedient. Why did he feel so uncomfortable? Xiaya couldn't help but crush a piece of material. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled. She immediately looked over and saw the shattered material in Xiaya's hand. It was the most expensive one. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but say, It's okay if it's broken. I've broken it many times too. Xiaya pinched the broken material. Then he silently picked up the beautifying lotion and shook it. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before she finally understood what he meant. In almost a second, a trace of a smile appeared on her indifferent expression. Then, an exaggerated smile appeared on his face. Xiaya, you're so amazing. You finished it so quickly. Xiaya, wait, what did he do? Holding the lowest grade beautifying lotion and showing it to Wei Wei Bai like a student craving praise? Even at his best, he didn't care about anyone's evaluation. Not to mention those old farts in the academy. Also, wasn't her smile a little too forced? Chapter 25:17. Shaya squeezed the beautifying water tightly and then released it, worried that it would break again. Then his thin lips lightly sighed, as if he disdainfully lowered his eyes. This thing, I can make 10,000 of them a day. After saying that, he really wanted to swallow his words. Why would he make these broken things? If it wasn't a play with her, he wouldn't even touch these cheap things. Wei Wei Bai supported her face with both hands and stared at him face to face. Her eyes were clear and soft, as deep as the sea. She couldn't help but smile, and her voice was soft and sweet. Yes, my Shaya is the most powerful. The love and worship in her eyes were not hidden, and were more beautiful than the flames. Shaya looked up, his eyes fixed on her face for a while, and then suddenly lowered his eyelashes in a daze. He was silent for a moment, and then lightly snorted. Who is yours? The girl looked at him sweetly. The light and shadow were beautiful, her face like a flower. And if you don't like this, then. Her face was close to him. Her delicate skin was like snow, and her long eyelashes trembled. She slowly said, I am Shaya's, that's fine too. These words were too casual. It was like a joking tone, but the affection in her eyes didn't have the slightest intention of joking. Shaya's breath stopped, as if he was stunned. After a long time, he continued to focus on the beautifying water in his hand. It seemed like the beautifying water was easy to make just now. But now it was bumpy and became extremely difficult. He accidentally broke some of the materials. He looked at Wei Wei Bai with some embarrassment, but found that the little witch was staring at the fire. It was as if she would always listen to and abide by his every word. Something in his heart was breaking out of its shell. It seemed to be sweet, but also bitter. Shaya couldn't tell, but he didn't have the strength to stop it. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 50. When sleeping, Shaya lay directly on the chair in the hall. A few chairs were barely enough to form a single, narrow bed. He put his hands behind his head and carefully listened to the sounds in the room without sleeping. She was asleep. Her breathing was unusually even. Shaya felt that this game seemed to be out of control. She didn't love him. It was the man who couldn't be any more dead. Who was that man? He didn't think that in this world there was anyone who looked similar to him and wasn't famous. Furthermore, he was in the aristocratic circle. Shaya was thinking when he suddenly heard something. He immediately got up and went to the window. The window opened. A man wearing a white hooded robe was kneeling respectfully. Lord Duke. It was the leader of the Church of Light, the Archbishop. Shaya's soft emotions were swept away. The young man's expression was indifferent, and his temperament was cold and ruthless. How have you been? The Archbishop immediately said, There is an internal strife in the palace. His Majesty has no time to take care of the Duke. Shaya said, Let them continue fighting. If he didn't make use of the king's sons, how could he make the king, that old bastard, suffer? The Archbishop nodded, then respectfully held Shaya's hand and touched it with his forehead. This was a great gesture of submission. Without waiting for the Archbishop to say anything like a blessing of light and other flattering words, suddenly there was a sound from the door. Shaya's expression changed, and he extended his leg to kick the Archbishop away. The window immediately closed automatically. He quickly lay down on the chair and didn't wait to close his eyes. He saw Wei Wei Bai's head poke out from behind the door. Shaya, did you hear something? Shaya replied coldly, No. Wei Wei Bai smiled. Maybe it's the wind. After saying that, she suddenly ran over with a soft blanket and placed it on his body. She lowered her head and kissed his cheek, then said with a sweet smile, Good night, Shaya. After saying that, she happily turned around and ran into the room. Shaya was silent. Then he pulled the blanket and pursed his lips, but he couldn't suppress the smile on his face. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 55. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 2518. Wei Wei Bai put bottles of beautifying water into a small basket. She said happily, As long as we sell these, we can buy a few more clothes. Shaya sat on the chair, casually and elegantly. The old chair was cushioned with red velvet. The beautiful young man's features were cold and exquisite, and there was a thick magic book on his lap. His pale eyelashes were dyed beautifully in the morning light. Hearing Wei Wei Bai's words, he looked up at her unhurriedly. The little witch was still wearing a simple hooded robe, and her thick hair was still unadorned. His gaze rested on her beautiful thick hair for a few seconds. He felt that, even without any decorations, she was much better looking than those noble women full of flowers and feathers. As if he didn't care, his voice was low. What did I used to be? He was already acting as if he had amnesia. The little witch didn't suspect anything. After all, she was clear about the after-effects of those drugs. She felt that it was fine as long as he could come back to life. She didn't seem to care that his personality had changed drastically and that he had lost his memory. She didn't realize that she had resurrected the wrong person. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment, and a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. Shea used to be a noble. Shea seemed a little surprised, but his eyes were calm. Then what about my family? Wei Wei Bai racked her brains, thinking about how to make up a story. It wasn't difficult to fool a person with amnesia. But to fool a person with amnesia, who obviously wanted to find his family, she couldn't make up a story. Wei Wei Bai thought about it, and in the end, she was tired. Forget it. Anyway, he had amnesia, so she could continue to fool him. A lie needed 10,000 lies to round it out. The white drama queen meant that 100 million lies were a piece of cake. So Wei Wei Bai looked sad. Shea doesn't have a family. A series of noble names flashed through Shea's mind. Nobles without families were pitifully few. After all, noble families were huge, and they had to be the only one left. Not possible, unless it was because of a crime and the whole family died together. Could it be that the man she loved was actually a criminal? As if she was afraid that he would be sad, the little witch pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. She just hurriedly carried the small basket and put on the hood. Her long hair fell out of the hood, and her small and fair face was unbelievably beautiful under the shadow of the hood. Then I'll leave first, Shea. It was as if she was afraid that he would ask more questions. She turned around and ran. Shea's eyes darkened until the little witch closed the door, and her footsteps gradually faded away. Only then did he stretch out his finger and touch the page. Find a man who has the same name as me and looks like me. He might be a minor noble, but his family has been wiped out. After saying that, he extended his finger. His fingertips were hooked around the old pocket watch, but it could be seen that it belonged to a noble. This belongs to him. If he dies, give me the information. The archbishop appeared from the shadows. He bowed his head respectfully and stretched out his hands, preparing to take the pocket watch. His voice was steady and sincere. Yes, your grace. What if he's still alive? Alive? Shad didn't think of this possibility. After all, if the little witch resurrected him, didn't that mean that her lover was dead? Shia was silent for a long time. In the incomparably cold atmosphere, the archbishop seemed to feel the power of the magic in the air surging. A layer of cold sweat appeared on his back. Did he say something wrong? Shia lowered his eyes. His purple eyes were so cold that the bottom couldn't be seen. His fingers moved, and the pocket watch fell into the archbishop's hand. Then, it was as if he had said something unimportant. If he's alive, then kill him. His words were calm and casual, but there was a murderous aura that made people shudder. / to facilitate your next reading, you can click on. Chapter 25:19. After the archbishop left, Shaya continued to read quietly. His pale eyelashes were dyed with light, and his thin lips were red under his delicate nose. It seemed that after a while, a hint of helplessness appeared on his indifferent face. The room was too quiet, and it seemed a little uncomfortable. Shaya casually threw the book on the table, and a wave of distortion appeared in the air. The young man on the chair had already disappeared. Only beautiful light spots were left. After Wei Wei Bai happily sold the beautifying water, she carried the basket and walked back. The system suddenly said, "There's a group of people in front." Wei Wei Bai's smile did not change. "What does it have to do with me?" The system said, "No, it's the Holy Son of the Church of Light on patrol." Wei Wei Bai was not curious at all. I'll take a detour. After all, the only connection she had with this world was Shia. She just had to deal with Shia. As for the original owner wanting to kill the Archbishop of the Church of Light, this was not her mission, so she would not pay attention to the Church of Light. Wei Wei Bai was about to disturb. A few rows of knights rushed over and blocked everyone's path. The Holy Sun is on patrol. Everyone stand by the roadside and lower your heads. Wei Wei Bai walked slowly and was squeezed to the front by the crowd. It would be too conspicuous to leave now, so she calmly reached out and pulled down the hood on her head. After covering most of her face, she stood in the crowd obediently with her head lowered. This way, she would not be conspicuous at all. Anyway, she waited for the Holy Sun to pass by. She went to the ready-made clothing store to buy 2 men's winter clothes and shoes. If she wanted a strategy, she had to do it slowly, and these little things had to be done carefully. As Bai Weiwei thought about it, she casually smoothed out her sleeves. After a while, she heard a burst of Western music like heavenly music. Weiwei Bai felt that so low class. Who would bring a stereo or something when they go out these days? It was too degrading. Everyone bowed their heads under the command of the guards and put their hands together in a respectful manner. Bai Weiwei also made a gesture and sat up. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw 2 rows of guards riding on silky black horses slowly approaching. All the guards surrounded a carriage. The carriage was not like those of other nobles, which were full of luxurious gems. The car was full of golden patterns. It was an extremely powerful magic array. A slender and hazy figure sat behind the veil of the carriage. No one could see his face clearly, but his noble and unreachable pretentious aura could be felt. Everyone quieted down, not daring to make a sound. Everyone lowered their heads and silently clenched their fists in front of their chests. This was the etiquette of the followers of the Church of Light. Wei Wei Bai frowned as a strange feeling welled up in her heart. Was the person in the carriage looking at her? She was extremely sensitive to sudden gazes. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head, her eyes extremely calm. The system started nagging. This saint is actually one of the sons of the old king. The old king of this plane has more than a dozen sons, and now the infighting is fierce. Wei Wei Bai asked, "A prince could be a saint?" The saint of the Church of Light sounded like an abbot in a temple to her. The system said, "Of course, because he is a prince, his identity is honorable enough to be a saint. Because the Church of Light is the family of the Rose Duchess, and it is an organization of public opinion created to counter the power of the royal family." Because the host was very concerned about the background of this plane, the system took the opportunity to explain to her. // Chapter 25:20. She wished she could say more. It was better to know more than less. Because of the destruction of the Evil Witch group, the believers of the Church of Light spread all over the continent, and their power increased greatly. Originally, the power of the Rose family and the royal family were only competing with each other. But because of the existence of the Church of Light, the power of the royal family was eroded. Now, as long as there is a branch of the Church of Light on the continent, it is the power of the Rose family. Wei Wei Bai searched her memory. She was a little surprised. The power of the Rose family was on the boundless continent of the kingdom. It was almost full of them. In other words, this kingdom basically had the power and territory of the Rose family. If the Rose family rebelled, the old king would be finished. What was more powerful was that when the old king was young, he was the kind of powerful monarch who attacked cities and seized territories to expand his territory. Even if he was old and a little muddle-headed, he wouldn't be weak to such an extent. It was really the Grand Duke of Rose who had forced the royal family to such an extent. And recently, the Rose Duke disappeared. It seemed that he fell into the land of the Holy Dragon, and there was a problem with magic. There were sequelae of the undead. Light magic to the last stage of cultivation. Life and death would be exchanged. Basically, a mage who entered the undead state had a high chance of dying directly. So now that the Rose Duke didn't appear, the power of the royal family began to erode the power of the Rose family again. After all, the most powerful person of the Rose family, the Rose Duke, died, and the old king was awesome again. And the main power of the Church of Light was the Archbishop. He was one of the loyal lackeys of the Rose Duke. The target of the original owner's revenge was this Archbishop's subordinate, the Bishop of the Eastern region. Because the original owner's mother died in the Eastern region, all the accounts had to be counted on the Bishop of the Eastern region. This was the range of the Rose family's power. The original owner was too weak, otherwise her target of revenge would have been the Rose Duke. To fight for power and profit, the witches became tragic victims. But this had nothing to do with her. After all, in this plane for Wei Wei Bai, it was more important to conquer Xia and live a good life. As for the rest of the Rose, the king. Fight, 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 more dramatic fights. She could just eat melon seeds and watch it like a drama. Vicious, dark, bystander Bai was such a pragmatic girl. The system said, so didn't the Duchess of Rose disappear? To plunder the resources of the masses in the church, the prince was sent to be the Holy Sun. As long as the Archbishop was killed, the Holy Sun is in control of the church. Everything that the Rose Duchess did has become the royal family's. This saint, they were here to seize the Church of Light. Wei Wei Bai was stuffed with a large amount of information by the system, indicating that she understood. Then he expressed that it had nothing to do with him. My little darling Xia is still waiting for me to go home. Can this pretentious Holy Sun walk faster? Wei Wei Bai chatted with the system about the gossip of the mainland. Bien lowered his head and clasped his hands in front of his chest. She looked exactly the same as thousands of onlookers. There was nothing outstanding about it. Suddenly, the carriage slowly drove past. The saint behind the curtain was incomparably cold. He was like a noble statue. The golden blue-eyed man suddenly looked up coldly. There's the scent of a witch. The Holy Sun was the next successor of the old king. He was also the youngest Prince Pellegrini. The princes who were fighting in the palace now were all cannon fodder for him to climb up the ranks. Chapter 25-21. Because he was the old king's most outstanding child. Whether it was magic or strategy, he was exceptionally powerful. The old king had placed all his hopes on him. The Rose family and the Rose Duke would be his stepping stone to become the king of this continent. Pigri's cold eyes swept across the crowd. He faintly locked onto Wei Wei Bai's range. But his locking magic had not reached the peak yet. For a moment, he could not find where the witch was. Now, there's actually a witch. How bold and stupid. Pigri, who needed prestige, urgently needed a few major events to let the people know about him and support him. If he found the witch here, then it would definitely be very good for his reputation. Pigri immediately ordered coldly, "There's an evil witch here." The carriage immediately stopped. All the guards immediately prepared for battle. Unfathomable. Like a prophecy, coldly came from the carriage. All the people were shocked. There is a witch. Didn't the bishop say that all the witches were dead? There must be a fish that escaped the net. This Holy Sun who suddenly appeared must be the protagonist who asked him to find the remaining witches. I'm so scared. I heard that witches eat human flesh. Wei Wei Bai rolled her eyes at the side. She couldn't even eat pork. How could she have the ability to eat human flesh? But the situation was not good, because near the square, all the guards surrounded this place. In addition, a thin light magic barrier appeared. It eliminated the possibility of so many people at the scene escaping. What if that pretentious Holy Sun really caught her and burned her to death? Wei Wei Bai frowned, thinking about how to avoid it. The curtain of the carriage was opened. Prince Pigri walked out slowly from inside. He was tall, wearing a beautiful and expensive magic white robe, and holding a scepter in his hand. His long golden hair was tied up and hung down his back. His blue eyes were as deep as the sea. This appearance, righteous and beautiful, immediately won the hearts of many girls. Of course, for Wei Wei Bai, after seeing Xia, everyone looked like they were defective goods at $9.90. She lowered her head, crossed her hands in front of her chest, and said to the system, "Is there anything to cover the witch's mark?" A series of noises came from the system. Let me see. These little things aren't available in the supermarket recently. It might take some time. Wei Wei Bai remained silent and slowly retreated. He tried his best to hide in the crowd. As for Pegrel, he was shocked by the commotion he had caused. He was extremely satisfied. All he had to do was find the witch. He stretched out his hand and said loudly under the sunlight, "With the holy sun of the Church of Light, no evil can hide. Vicious and dark witches cannot survive under the light of the holy sun." After that, he began to chant a magic incantation. He just so happened to have learned a large-scale light magic array. As long as the person with the witch's mark was inside, it would definitely hurt like a burning fire. On the other hand, whoever was in agony would be the witch. He did not wait for the system to find something that could cover the witch's mark. The magic of light had already descended. Wei Wei Bai felt her skin begin to burn. She looked fine, but the burning sensation made her feel like a flame was burning her. Wei Wei Bai clenched her teeth as her body trembled. This pain was a little beyond the limits of his endurance. Her face was pale. Without waiting for the reminder, the system had already taken out a life guarantee and threw it at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai suddenly did not feel any pain, but her body's reaction was still there. / to facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 25-22. Her face was pale, and she was sweating profusely. Life subsistence and other pain-relieving skills did not hide the body's instincts. Although she was not in pain, her body still hurt. She had all the physical reactions. Her legs were beginning to weaken. Wei Wei Bai held her breath, not daring to raise her head and not showing any expression of pain. But if someone were to lift her hood, they would be able to see her abnormally pale face, and her head full of sweat from the pain. Pegrel was on the carriage, looking down coldly. The light magic array had been activated for so long. If it was a witch, she should have shown signs of struggle. This was his first appearance in front of the public and showing a miracle. The witch had to appear. Otherwise, his reputation would be ruined. Pegrel said coldly, "I didn't expect that evil dark demon to be so cunning. But under my holy light, evil will have nowhere to hide." After saying that, he waved his hand. "Everyone, raise your heads." He did not believe that such top-notch light magic could not force the witch out. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale, and her fingers were shaking so much that she could not hold them. When she raised her head, her abnormality could not be hidden. Everyone raised their heads, and Wei Wei Bai, who had been lowering her head, was very conspicuous. Pegrel immediately sneered. "The believer in the hood, raise your head." The order from above was like looking down at ants. Wei Wei Bai only felt that the order had just been given. A wave of targeted light magic attacked directly. She had the witch's mark on her body. As long as it was an offensive light magic, it would be harmful to her. And this offensive spell was meant to take her life. Wei Wei Bai was about to let the system send her away. Her identity was exposed for the time being. Survival was more important. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a pale and slender hand gently landed on her back. The light magic attack had just landed on Wei Wei Bai's body. After a burst of light, Wei Wei Bai was still standing properly. Even the abnormality on her body disappeared. Only a cool breeze surrounded her. This cooling protective power came from a young man who stretched out his hand. The voice of the person behind him was low and hoarse, with a hint of helplessness. Surprisingly, there was a hint of elegance in the voice. "Why am I being bullied just because I haven't seen you for a while?" Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She whispered, "Xia." The grievance in his voice sounded like he was about to cry. Hearing her cries, the hand that was placed on her thin back tightened a little. It seemed that the owner of the hand was angry. Then, those beautiful fingers slowly moved down and finally reached her waist. With a slight tug of his fingers, he pulled the aggrieved girl into his warm embrace. Xia, who was wearing the same poor people's coarse cloth robe with a hood, was standing behind her. The youth's scattered honey-colored hair fell under his eyes. In the gloomy shadows, his purple eyes were deep and dark. "Don't be afraid. I'm here," the little witch muttered as if she didn't believe him. "You were resurrected by black magic. That saint will kill you. I am a witch. I will be burned to death too." She was worried and scared in a small voice. It made his eyes even colder and more frightening. The youth was like a harmless large animal. He gently rested his chin on her weak shoulder. There was a smile in his words. "It's okay. My Wei Wei is the kindest witch. Light magic won't hurt you at all." Wei Wei Bai seemed to be in disbelief. Shaya said gently, "Do you feel better? You just didn't encounter any large-scale magic, so you weren't used to it in the beginning. You're okay now." Bai Weiwei seemed to have been fooled into a daze. "But I'm a witch," Shaya whispered softly. It was as gentle as the rose fragrance of the wind. "It doesn't matter if we die together. Aren't you my lover?" His lover was in his mouth, intimately beautiful. Weiwei Bai's ears were numb. It was so itchy that the tips of her ears turned red. But she was touched. After such a long time of hypnosis and brainwashing, she finally brainwashed an amnesiac into her lover. The bright future ahead of her made her feel that all the hard work was worth it. When Shaya glanced sideways, he saw her pale face under the hood and the cold sweat on her forehead. His cold eyes were even more terrifying. With killing intent, Shaya slowly raised his eyes. He looked at the saints standing on the carriage. Chapter 25-23. After the light passed, the hooded girl didn't show any abnormalities. Pigri frowned, and whispers of complaints came from below. Not everyone was completely unscathed after being trapped here, even the believers of the Church of Light. But the Holy Sun had just arrived and didn't have any prestige or reputation. If he didn't do a good job, he would be criticized and complained. Is there really a witch? I don't know. I didn't see anyone uncomfortable. But this magic array is really beautiful. What's the use of looking good? It's just fooling people. There's no witch. The Archbishop said that all witches were eliminated. Would the Archbishop lie to us? That's true. This Holy Sun is so young. He probably doesn't know any magic at all. Could it be that he's here to fish for fame? More and more doubts came. The Holy Sun who had just appeared suffered an unimaginable loss of reputation. Pigri's face suddenly darkened. Could it be that the hooded girl was actually a human? But there was indeed a witch's dark aura in her area. Everyone looked up, but there was no witch. Wait a minute. When did another hooded person appear beside that girl? Pigri's eyes flashed and saw the slender figure slowly raise his head. Under the dark hood, the purple eyes were stunning. The young man's delicate thin lips slowly curved into a cold smile. That smile was like the arrival of the death god. It was gorgeous to the extreme and made people feel fear. Pigri's pupils shrank and his heart trembled. Purple eyes. There was only one person in this empire who had such beautiful purple eyes. It was the Duke of Rose. Wasn't he dead? How was he still alive? Just as he was about to retreat, he found that his body was bound by some unknown force. Before he could react, he felt the sharp pain of thousands of needles. They pierced through his bones. A strange light film twisted in the air. Only the Holy Sun could see it. He wanted to call for help, but he found that his voice was blocked by the light film. He wanted to escape, but he found that the magic he was so proud of had disappeared. He had always been proud, even if he had heard of the terror of the Duke of Rose. Even his father, the Emperor, had a flash of fear in his eyes at the mention of the Rose Duke. But he had always been disdainful. He felt that he was blessed by the heavens. He was fully deserving of being the future master of this empire. The speed at which he learned magic was worthy of being called a genius. This was not the first time he had met the Rose Duchess. But in the past, they were always at banquets, and he was the high and mighty prince. Even when he met the Rose Duchess, he was shocked by her beauty. He looked down on him even more. He felt that his reputation came more from his stunning looks. But after interacting with him today, he realized that he didn't even have the slightest strength to resist. Pigri thought of the fear in his father's eyes. Fear began to appear in his eyes. Because there was a problem with his breathing, the feeling of suffocation started to make him experience the feeling of death. In fact, he couldn't even struggle. The magic gap between him and the Rose Duchess was so big that it made people despair. The saint's sorry state was finally discovered. His face was deathly pale, and he was sweating profusely. His hands and feet were trembling, and a dark aura was emanating from his body. It was a death aura similar to that of witches. Finally, someone in the crowd realized that something was wrong. Look at the saint's body. Is there a black aura? Chapter 25-24. Didn't you say that this magic array can find witches? Could it be? Don't talk nonsense. Isn't the Holy Son a man? Witches are full of tricks. Drugs can do many things that can't be done. Could the Holy Son have been contaminated by witches? These words were more terrifying than the suffocating pain just now. If this continued, Pigree's reputation would be ruined. He would not be able to have a foothold in the Church of Light. He would be regarded as an abandoned son by the old king. His bright future was ruined because of the Rose Duchess. But he couldn't understand why the Rose Duke would suddenly attack him. The relationship between the royal family and the Rose family was still peaceful on the surface. Even if the two sides hated each other to death, they wouldn't suddenly fall out. Pigree didn't have time to think. He suddenly felt that he could move and immediately rolled and crawled into the carriage. Go quickly. His voice trembled in fear, as if he was being chased by some demon. The carriage immediately moved, and the light magic array was also broken. It was like an unusual farce that ended without a cause. The scene that His Royal Highness had painstakingly set up to reap the reputation. But it was completely destroyed. The Holy Son wanted to snatch the Archbishop's authority. It was impossible in a short time. It would take a lot of effort to repair the reputation. Pigree racked his brains, but he still didn't know why the Rose Duke suddenly attacked him. Could it be that he couldn't wait to rebel? When Pigree's carriage passed by the Rose Duke's place, his terrified eyes looked through the gauze curtain and saw the gorgeous youth that made people terrified. The youth was lowering his head and saying something gently to the girl in front of him. He didn't look like a killing god just now. Instead, he was so gentle that he thought he had mistaken him for someone else. After all, everyone knew how cold the Rose Duke was to people. He even wore gloves when others wanted to shake his hand. He was simply rude and arrogant to the extreme. But the youth who had always been cold and cruel had his eyes lowered and his thin lips gently curled up. That smile was like the warm sun. His hands were hugging the waist of the petite figure in front of him. Pigree couldn't help but look at the girl he suspected of being a witch. Under the big hood, he only had time to see her side profile. The side of her face was clean and fair, and her skin was as beautiful as an illusion. Even if it was only for a second, it was enough to move one's heart. Peggy could not help but poke his head out to take a look. However, he found that the Rose Duchess had already raised her eyes with a faint smile. The killing intent in her eyes was still clear. Peggy was terrified. He gripped his sleeves tightly and bit out a name as if he was about to bleed. Shea, West. Hatred and fear, just like the old king. He didn't know why the Rose Duchess attacked him, but it was very likely that it had something to do with that girl. Countless vicious schemes flashed through Pigree's mind. Then he slowly sat up, only to find that his body was still in so much pain that he could barely sit still. And he found that his magic seemed to have been sucked away. Peggy's expression turned even more unsightly. The crowd began to disperse. This farce caused the saint's reputation to hit rock bottom. Wei Wei Bai's expression also improved. She looked up at the youth behind her. Shea, I'm much better. The cold smile on Shaya's face turned gentle. I said, are you okay? Go home. He didn't tell her how dangerous the scene just now was. If he hadn't suddenly wanted to see her, she might have died in the light magic attack just now. Seeing the little witch's clueless face, he secretly sighed in relief. Slash. Chapter 25-25. She ran around everywhere, not knowing how sensitive her identity was. The witches were almost wiped out. The Church of Light was trying to win over the people. They used exaggerated propaganda to say that all the witches had been wiped out. In fact, there were still some that escaped. So the church was still secretly searching for the remaining witches. And the little witch might be caught by the church and killed. Thinking of this, Shaya couldn't help but tighten his grip on her waist. It was really too dangerous. To her, this world was full of malice. And this thick malice was brought about by his policies. Shaya's eyes darkened as he suppressed the uneasiness in his heart. It seemed that he had to think of a way to remove the witch mark on her, or to pardon the remaining witches. No more hunting for the witches. Shaya turned over some plans in his mind. He noticed Wei Wei Bai's puzzled eyes, but he didn't reveal any clues. Then he held her hand with his fingers and said in a gentle voice, "Let's go home." Without her at home, he felt that he wasn't used to it. Wei Wei Bai nodded and suddenly thought of something. She smiled and said, "Shaya, let's go buy clothes." Shaya had never bought clothes before. His clothes were all designed by his personal tailor. Whatever was popular in the capital, the tailor team would design it immediately. In any case, he had never worried about food, clothing, shelter, and transportation in his life. But for the little witch, taking her to buy clothes, it seemed to be a particularly grand matter. She counted the iron coins with a serious and cute face. "The clothes at home are old, and some don't fit. Did you grow taller again?" When Shaya heard that the clothes didn't fit, his eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. Not fitting, wasn't it because she mistook him for someone else? Shaya stood quietly and didn't respond to this topic. He even felt that it was best to throw away all the unsuitable clothes at home. And those books, those things that were full of traces of that man. Little by little, it would be better if they disappeared. Just as this thought came to him, he frowned slightly. When did he start to have this kind of problem? Wasn't it just for fun? Wei Wei Bai took out a set of good-looking civilian clothes, turned around, and said to Shaya, "Try it on, Shaya." The crisp exchange brought Shaya's thoughts back. He looked at her quietly. His eyes were deep, and there was even a hint of hesitation in them. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were clear as she smiled and said, "You don't like it? Then I'll choose another one." Shaya was silent for a while before slowly shaking his head. "No, it's very beautiful." After all, someone else had chosen the clothes for him. This was the first time. Then he stretched out his fingers and took the clothes. His fingertips brushed against hers. It was warm and gentle. He paused for a moment, as if something was strange. All the strange thoughts began to surface because of a doubt. The Duke had always been inexperienced in such matters. At this moment, his performance was simply embarrassing. He grabbed his clothes tightly and casually draped them over his body. Because he had chosen a winter coat, therefore, he could tell whether it was suitable by simply draping it over his shoulder. The young man's body was unusually good-looking and slender, but not overly muscular. Perhaps it was because of his aristocratic lifestyle, but his complexion was exceptionally fair and beautiful. But she did not have the overly fragile beauty that the aristocrats worshipped. Instead, she had a kind of cold handsomeness. Even if he was draped in commoner's clothes, it did not detract from his noble beauty. Shaya stretched out his fingers and unhurriedly tugged at the collar of the coat. The laces were not tied. He just casually draped it over his shoulders. Chapter 25-26. His wrist bones were delicate and strong, and the veins on the back of his clean hands were faintly visible. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up, overflowing with love and admiration. She couldn't help but hold her face with both hands, blushing. Very suitable. Shaya was actually a little embarrassed. After all, they were in a shop. People were coming and going. The customers and the boss were all staring at him. He hated this kind of gaze. But when Wei Wei Bai looked at him with admiration, the irritation in his heart was suddenly replaced by a strange kind of joy. Shaya coughed softly. "Then buy it." Wei Wei Bai immediately walked over and reached out to take off his clothes. The girl's petite body was almost buried in his arms to take the clothes. Shaya's body stiffened a little, and his breath was filled with her scent. It was too sweet. He even wanted to take a bite of it. This inexplicable feeling of joy seemed to be contagious, and it lasted for a long time. He saw a pile of clothes and ladies' clothes. There were rows and rows of cheap but fashionable dresses hanging on the walls. For the Duke, these dresses were too shabby and trashy. But he couldn't just go back and ask his tailor to make clothes for the little witch. If he did that, he would definitely be exposed. But the little witch was so cute. Even if she wore a shabby robe, she still looked good. While thinking, Shaya did something a man shouldn't do. With a sharp eye, he took out the best cut. The dress was elegant, with a rich red hemline and lace cuffs. It was the most popular design in the capital recently. Although the material was really not good, the design was okay. And the size was just right. Shaya held the dress and looked at Wei Wei Bai with deep eyes. He saw the little witch haggling. Then he slowly walked over with the dress. After buying the clothes, the Duke was in a very good mood as he endured the little witch's nagging. After buying the dress, you can only buy winter clothes. There's nothing to change. She pursed her lips in dissatisfaction and complained from time to time. The Duke's eyes were deep and gentle. It's fine. Don't we still have some old clothes? Wei Wei Bai unhappily muttered. I want Shaya to wear new clothes. When Shaya heard this, his heart felt as if it was soaked in honey water, mixed with a bit of sourness. These were all for other men to hear. But it's fine. That man is dead. He's definitely dead. When he thought of this, his mind relaxed. He was even more unable to resist the surging emotions in his heart. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 60. Wei Wei Bai, yea, a small stream flows a long stream. I've successfully gained a good impression from buying clothes. After returning home, Wei Wei Bai went to cook. Shaya had gradually recovered his taste buds. As for Wei Wei Bai's food, he wondered if all the poor people cooked like this. He couldn't help but feel that the taste was beyond his expectations. Of course, a man who had fallen in love had no IQ. Therefore, even if what he ate was poison, he would gladly endure it. The little witch ran to the kitchen. The window opened gently, and the archbishop appeared, bowing respectfully. He was just about to greet the Duke. A book was smashed into his face. Shaya's voice was extremely soft, but terrifyingly cold. Silence. The archbishop hurriedly held the book in pain, and then took out a stack of information from his arms. Then, he didn't dare to make a sound. He took his leave. Shaya held the stack of information, his eyes darkening. This was the information of the man that the little witch liked. The man she liked, what was he like? Why was she so sure that he was her lover? Suddenly, he looked at the stack of information that was put into the bag and wanted to destroy it. Shaya. Wei Wei Bai's voice suddenly sounded. Shaya was shocked, and with a flip of his hand, he threw the information into the magic space. He looked at his empty fingers and secretly sighed. Then, he turned around expressionlessly. Seeing Wei Wei Bai, he asked with a smile, "What do you want to eat tonight?" Shaya stared at her quietly. The rays of the setting sun projected on his body, elongating his slender shadow. The youth's quiet beauty was rich to the point of being gorgeous, like a god walking out of a thick and heavy oil painting. He suddenly smiled, a gentle smile, diluting the strange beauty of his body. I'll eat whatever Wei Wei eats. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were full of smiles, as if he was the only one in her eyes. The pure girl was like a gift that came out of nowhere, making the Duke, who had no feelings for her, feel an irrepressible impulse. Anyway, that man is dead. Then, so what if he replaces him? Anyway, it's fine as long as the little witch doesn't know, right? Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 65. Chapter 25-27. Wei Wei Bai. This relationship is rising too quickly. It doesn't match the feeling of a steady stream, but it should be because she is too successful as a nanny. The system kept feeling that something was wrong. It seemed that there was something wrong with a plane where the favorability rose too quickly. He focused on observing the emotions of Yeshuan Dog. The information of this plane was incomplete. He was a little unable to control the situation. But seeing that the host and the male lead were both happy, it seemed that there was nothing wrong. The system was worried while installing the Rubik's Cube. 100 Rubik's Cube had a day and a half of life value. He had already accumulated a small amount of life value by doing handicrafts. He suddenly felt that he was rich again. After dinner, Wei Wei Bai carefully removed the threads on the clothes. Shaya took the dress and put it in the wardrobe. She said that she would wear it in the future. Shaya knew that she couldn't bear to wear it. After all, selling the beauty water would make a little profit, plus living expenses. Buying a new dress was a big expense for the little witch. But she would rather not buy it for herself, but take all the money to buy two for him. He had never felt such a simple and beautiful Duke. He felt that although his castle was gorgeous, it was actually very cold. The servants were very quiet. They were afraid of disturbing him. Everything was prepared under the butler's attention. Year after year, there was no change. He was used to those days, so he didn't feel much. But Xia quietly raised his thick eyelashes under the dazzling candlelight. His purple eyes were clear and bright. The reflection in his eyes was the little witch who was sitting under the candlelight, bending her body and trimming the threads with small scissors in her fingers. The little witch's beautiful side face was even more hazy and beautiful in the light. That soft, white, jade-like cheek was like a little angel with small wings in a painting, naive and ignorant of the dangers of the world. Her lips were bright red like rose petals. Under the light, there was a moist feeling of a thin layer of water vapor. Wei Wei Bai finished cutting the lines and checked the clothes. Commoners' clothes were cheap and trendy. It was just that the quality was a little bad. She shook her clothes and was about to put them away when her wrist was suddenly grabbed. Wei Wei Bai was taken aback. Her whole body was pulled over by this force, and she sat on Xiaoya's lap. The young man's eyes were filled with suppressed heat, but he didn't do anything. Instead, he hugged her. Then, with an indifferent expression, he stretched out his hand and took the clothes. Then, he folded it in a somewhat awkward manner. Was he going to hug her and fold her clothes? Wei Wei Bai sat in his arms obediently and did not struggle. He just felt that the young man's temperature was a little hot. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. A boy of this age? Huh. However, it could be seen that he was still too inexperienced. When he hugged her, he was so nervous that he didn't know what to do. She could only fold the clothes. He folded the clothes and gently placed them on Wei Wei Bai's lap. He rubbed her ear and said in a hoarse voice, "Put it in the closet later. I'll wear it tomorrow." Wei Wei Bai's ears immediately itched. His breathing was too close, just like a feather rubbing against her ear. Xiao looked down and saw that her white skin was dyed red. He pursed his lips in satisfaction and smiled. The castle was cold and cheerless. The old house here was dark and depressing. Only there was one more person. The environment had become lively and comfortable. Or he could find an opportunity to trick her into returning to the castle. Such a cold and cheerless castle could also become so warm and cheerful. Chapter 25-28. Various schemes of deception flashed through Xiaoya's big bad wolf mind. Wei Wei Bai, the little cutie, was also thinking about how to create a surprise in the long run. Let the favorability level rise to another level. The atmosphere was unusually warm and beautiful. Xiaoya enjoyed this warm feeling, his fingers gently touching Wei Wei Bai's cuff. The cloth was too coarse. Maybe I should form a team of female tailors. They specialized in making women's clothes. In the aristocratic circle, female tailors were the most common and the most professional. After all, those women who had nothing to do and held banquets every day. Other than competing for beauty, there was nothing else they could do. Wei Wei Bai sat on his lap in a daze, not daring to move, letting him touch her cuff. Xiaoya stared at her and suddenly asked softly, "Did you buy clothes for me like this before?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up. It was her specialty again. She was good at making up stories. Her face immediately became gentle. "No, I almost didn't have the chance to buy clothes for you, because you had a tailor." Indeed, aristocrats were tailors. No matter how small the aristocrat was, they all had tailors. Xiaoya asked faintly. Then the clothes in the wardrobe, Wei Wei Bai sighed and said, "That's because after you were with me, your road to aristocracy was cut off, so I had no choice but to buy them. They were all relatively cheap clothes. You weren't used to wearing them at first." "Not used to wearing them?" "That's right. Aristocrats were used to being spoiled. Even if he often went out to temper himself, he was not interested in coarse cloth clothes. But if he really wore them, these coarse clothes would not cause him any discomfort." He carelessly touched the buttons of her cuff with his fingertips. "Then, I lost my memory. Did my personality change?" Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and snorted. "You just realized that Xiaoya's become a lot colder, but it's all because of the after effects of the magic medicine. After all, you forgot about me." The little girl complained delicately. She was not necessarily angry. However, there was a hint of sadness in his heart. Shaya's fingertips stiffened for a moment before he changed the topic. Then, what's the difference between me and before? Wei Wei Bai said, he's become cold. Shaya's voice was extremely low. How enthusiastic was I in the past? Wei Wei Bai tilted her head and thought for a moment. Suddenly, she turned sideways and hugged his neck with both hands. The young man's body stiffened. The little witch's eyes sparkled. In the past, when you held me in your arms, you didn't just fold clothes. Her words had a double meaning. Shaya understood, and a strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. But soon, his eyelashes trembled, covering the thick purple murderous intent in his eyes. Oh, I was a little too cold. As soon as she finished speaking, he grabbed her slender wrist with his fingers on her sleeve. His other hand pressed down on her face and pulled her into his embrace. It was filled with a domineering and vicious sense of attack. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was going to be crushed by Shaya's strength. The beautiful young man lowered his head and looked at the beautiful girl in his arms. It's okay. I'll be very friendly to you in the future. Wei Wei Bai blinked. She felt that there was something wrong with this guy's reaction. Jealous? Wait, why was he jealous? Was he the king of jealousy? Was he the king of jealousy? Before he could figure it out, his fingers pinched her chin, and the young man lowered his head. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Download crossover system, Adonis, come here crossover system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 25-29. Her breathing disappeared. Finally, he left. Wei Wei Bai came back to her senses, her eyes wide open. Shaya's eyes were dangerous and seductive. He asked in a low voice, "What's the difference between me and before? I'll change them one by one." Wei Wei Bai shook her head quickly and desperately. It's the same. Even you have become more beautiful. Everyone likes to hear flattery. There's no harm in saying more. Xia, become more beautiful? What's the difference? Is it that his appearance is different from the previous man? Wei Wei Bai was about to continue racking her brains to say more nice things. Then she heard, ding. The little witch and the little baron had a deep affection for each other in those years. Wei Wei Bai, the little tortoise is here again. It's late, but it's still here. Why is it here again? Without waiting for Wei Wei Bai to cover her ears, she wished she could be an ostrich. The seductive and sexy voice of the side quest sounded again. The witch is evil, vicious, and terrifying. But the kind and handsome little baron was injured by a wild boar while hunting. This side quest was a bit long-winded. It even came with a story. When he woke up again, he found that he had been picked up by the little witch and brought home. The little witch is kind and cute, thrifty, and housekeeping. The two of them fell in love. Wei Wei Bai, she always felt that the kind, cute, thrifty, and housekeeping little witch was referring to her. But the two of them have very different identities. To save the little witch, the little baron died under the pursuit of the Church of Light. To save the little baron, the little witch made a resurrection potion. She finally succeeded, resurrecting someone else. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss. Why did the prelude of this side quest grow into a foot-binding cloth? The side quest was getting better and better at stealing the limelight and attention. Ding, substitute side quest activated. Identity of the little baron, identity of the little witch, all past scenes redone. The person you love is already dead. The person you resurrect is your enemy. Host, please complete the substitute horizontal bar mission. Punishment for failure, disfigurement of the soul. As soon as the word disfigurement was mentioned, Wei Wei Bai's temples started to throb. Then he noticed that his soul was disfigured. So she asked what it meant. The non-existent system immediately explained. Once a soul is disfigured, no matter how you reincarnate or how you transmigrate, as long as a soul enters a body, the body will be disfigured. Wei Wei Bai, this was worse than killing her. She would rather die than be disfigured. She looked up, and sure enough, there was a substitute bar above her head. It was the kind of health bar that was used in games. But this bar showed zero progress. She was actually still a little confused as to what this side mission required. A substitute? Little Baron? The one he loved was already dead. The resurrected one was an enemy? In this day and age, it was almost impossible to use one's brain to do a side quest. The system finally saw Xiaoya's information appear in the data bar. The Duke of Rose. And he didn't lose his memory. He was a drama queen from beginning to end. System, now it said that he would be killed by the host, right? The system still said it. Its love for the host was as high as the sky and deep as the earth. It was not afraid of death. Wei Wei Bai's mind was filled with extra information. After reading it, she was silent for a long time. The so-called magic potion was completely useless. Because Xiaya was originally alive, he became a skeleton only because he was in the state of a necromancer at that time. Quick! Chapter 25-30. And in addition to the Rose Duke's information, there was also the information of a strange man. It was that little Baron, blonde hair and purple eyes, looking like a teenager. He was unusually handsome, but of course, he couldn't compare to Xiaoya's beauty. But it could be seen that he was somewhat similar to Xiaoya. To create a mission, even the excuse of her randomly making up a strategy, it was all made real. Even a person could be made out of thin air. Although that person was a dead person, the amount of information that was modified was unusually large. To make the substitute story seem more realistic and logical, the little Baron was also called Xiaya. In this era, there were many people with the same name. Moreover, he was a distant relative of the West Rose family. This also explained why the little Baron's appearance was somewhat similar to the Rose Duke's. Even the rare purple eyes were the same. The little bitch of the side mission was to make her substitute story come true. Who had an affair with the little Baron? Damn you, even the side mission is made up nonsense these days. Can't you happily make the strategy? Wei Wei Bai was a little sluggish because of the side mission. Her fingers grabbed Xiaoya's collar, her face leaning on his chest, her face a little pale. She seemed to have thought of some bad memories. Xiaoya's eyes turned cold. Was she thinking about the dead man? But this topic was brought up by him. It was natural for the little witch to think about it. Although he thought so, Xiaoya's fingers that were pinching her waist couldn't help but tighten a little. Wei Wei Bai immediately woke up. The paleness on her face was unusually conspicuous. But she immediately raised a smile. You were very good before. For some reason, this sentence seemed unusually heavy and sweet. Xiaoya's expression didn't change. His eyes deepened a little, and he moved his lips. In the end, he didn't say anything, and the substitute bar moved forward half a point. Only half a point for a mission of 100 points. By Wei Wei, this task, I don't have a clue. Is the side mission also disabled? It doesn't even have an explanation. Thinking so, she heard the side mission ring. Ding! The substitute mission is forcibly activated. Within 24 hours, please recognize that the person you love is the little Baron and expose the truth of the male lead deceiving you. Failed. The plane's face is disfigured. Wei Wei Bai. If her face was disfigured again, she would rebel. Little bitch. Disfigured, la 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 la. Wei Wei Bai. Xiaya saw that the girl's face had become even paler. Her eyes were sorrowful, and she grabbed his collar with unusual strength. The Duke couldn't help but lower his head slightly. His honey-colored curly hair fell under his eyes, creating a thick shadow. His thin lips curled up slightly, revealing a comforting smile. What is it, Wei Wei? Wei Wei Bai's fingertips trembled, and she forced a smile. I was just thinking about when you died. Xiaya indifferently lowered his eyes. Am I not fine now? But how did you find me? She brought him back from the cemetery. How could he be so sure that he was that lover? Wei Wei Bai seemed to have experienced a nightmare. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat, but her eyes were very bright. It was the result of a divination. I couldn't find you, but the divination told me that you were in the cemetery. Xiaoya's eyes were deep. Did you do the divination yourself? Wei Wei Bai immediately nodded and looked up at him, her eyes full of smiles that longed for praise. Yes, I'm good, right? Xiaya looked at her silently for a while before nodding. Yes, you're good. Finally, she could explain why she was so sure that he was her lover. because her divination was wrong. With the little witch's clumsy magic, it would be strange if she could succeed in the divination. Wei Wei Bai obediently leaned in his arms, almost curling up into a ball. She muttered silently, "Although your personality has changed a little, and you've become more good-looking, unlike before, it should be the after-effects of the magic medicine." So even if his personality had changed greatly, his appearance had also changed. She didn't suspect that it was because of the serious after-effects of the witch's magic medicine. Xiao was very sharp and heard her words clearly. He lowered his eyes incomparably cold. Then he reached out and touched her hair, feeling the beauty of her soft hair passing through his fingertips. "I was so good before. I will be better now. So that man, let him completely disappear. Right, Wei Wei? / Chapter 25:31. Wei Wei Bai fooled Xia, her mind full of the troubles of the side quest. This substitute quest. To put it bluntly, the side quest was to make it real. In other words, she had to love the little baron, and the Duke was a substitute. She had to recognize this clearly, otherwise, the side quest would definitely fail. And within 24 hours, she had to expose the scam of Xia's substitute. He really had a belly full of bitter water flowing backwards. The lover story she casually made up had now become a mountain of problems. It would crush her without explanation. Once this was exposed, don't talk about a long term. There was basically no chance of a strategy in the future. After all, she couldn't slap her own face and say that she loved the little baron. In the blink of an eye, she had a favorable impression of the big liar Duke. How could this be convincing without a transition? Wei Wei Bai secretly glanced at Xia, who was sitting by the bed. The beautiful young man lowered his head, holding a book and reading a story unhurriedly. He didn't seem to notice her peeping. Because his voice was low and gentle, it was unusually pleasant and gorgeous. Wei Wei Bai listened and finally fell asleep. Xia was still reading the book unhurriedly, until the sound of her even breathing rang out. He put down the book, stretched out his pale and slender fingers, pulled the blanket, and covered her tightly. The little witch was sleeping peacefully, her porcelain white face soft and soft. The young man stared at her for a while, then slowly lowered his head and kissed her cheek, feeling the warmth of her face for a while. He got up, reached out to adjust his messy collar, and elegantly turned to leave. The commoner's old clothes were too short for him. His pants were also too short, causing his white ankles to be exposed. Xia didn't care, but walked to the living room, with a wave of his hand. The information of the Archbishop's investigation was spread out, and page by page flew out of the space crack. The young man stood in the middle of the living room. The candlelight was strong, and the room was full of light. A portrait in the information was also spread out. A man, no, still a young man, about the same age as the little witch. Purple eyes, blonde hair, a delicate face, a bright smile. He was actually a distant relative of Wester. His face was somewhat similar to him. This also explained why the little witch believed in the effects of divination so much, coupled with the after effects of the magic potion and her urgent need to revive her lover. Various coincidences had led to her mistaking him for someone else. Xia reached out and touched the pages one by one. He was a baron, a low-level noble. His family was not rich, but it was enough to maintain the image of a low-level noble. Because he fell in love with a witch, he was held accountable by the Wester family. In addition, the Church of Light had completely annihilated the witches. Thus, this baron became an example to the others. He was regarded as a traitor who had colluded with the witches and was immediately hunted down and executed by the family guards. The death of a small baron from a side branch was a very small matter to the Rose family. Even Xia had no impression of it. His eyes were cold, and his finger gently fell on one of the pages. The little witch's information was on it. She was the daughter of a witch and had no criminal record, but she tried to attack the bishop of the eastern region of the Church of Light. Of course it failed. He didn't know how she managed to escape, but she didn't get caught and executed. And the time she attacked the bishop was after the death of her mother and the young baron. It was as if he had no one to rely on and was planning to commit suicide. and the protagonist of the Eastern region was the murderer of her mother. He was also the leader who led the guards to hunt down the Baron. He had some impression of the protagonist of the Eastern region. Chapter 25:32. He was an important confidant of the Archbishop, so he would be instructed to do many things. Shaya pointed at the little witch's page of information. He stared at it silently for a long time before gently lowering his eyelids. There was a soft helplessness in his deep purple eyes. The Church of Light was his. So he was actually the murderer who killed her mother and her lover. But the little witch didn't think so much and didn't even know the relationship between the Rose Duke and the church. So she never talked about the deeds of the Rose family. In this room, there was no trace of information collected for revenge. Even the church's information, except for the light magic books that the Baron brought, there was no trace of it. It could be seen that when the little witch took revenge, she wasn't prepared at all and attacked impulsively. Later, she found the resurrection magic potion. It was the legendary medicine for the witch's servant. She brought him back by a wrong divination and fed him the precious magic potion. That was why this series of mistaken identities happened. The resurrection magic potion of the witch's servant, but there was no trace of a servant's restriction. If any witch wasted such a precious magic potion, she would definitely be laughed to death. But the little witch still didn't put any restrictions, as if she knew that the person she resurrected was not a servant, but a lover. All the doubts were solved. Suddenly, a golden light spot appeared on Shaya's fingertips. The light spot appeared on the paper, floating in the air. The information was eroded bit by bit. In the end, it turned into countless light spots, and all the information shattered in the air. It turned into golden powder and was blown away by the wind. The Baron's bones were taken back. Even if he committed a crime, he was still a distant branch of the Rose family. So after his death, the body was taken back and placed in the Rose family's cemetery on the lower floor. The little witch thought that he was in the mass grave and didn't realize that she had found a wrong place. That's right, people who were not nobles didn't have the concept of noble cemetery and private cemetery. Most people died because of poverty or crime. They would be thrown into the mass grave. And the witch was obviously the kind of person who was thrown into the mass grave. That's why the little witch went to the mass grave. Seeing that all the information disappeared, Shaya slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Only now did he realize how stiff his muscles had been. That young man's personality was the complete opposite of his. Fortunately, the little witch was able to walk the same path to the end. They were clearly different, but she could still recognize the wrong person until now. Perhaps she didn't dare to admit that she had mistaken him for someone else. Shaya quietly stood in place, his silent appearance giving off an extremely cold, oppressive feeling. The side of his face was so exquisite that it was flawless. It was like the work of God. He remained silent for a while, with an expressionless face, before he turned around and walked into the room. The single bed was still so narrow, and the little witch fell asleep with the quilt in her arms. There were a few traces of red marks on her cute sleeping face, which added a bit of charm. Fortunately, she was a witch who could only hide in a dark corner. Otherwise, she would be so beautiful if he was a child of a noble. At this moment, her beauty had spread far and wide. After all, those so-called #1 beauties in the capital weren't even fit to carry her shoes. Shaya unhurriedly took off his shoes and squeezed her with great effort, pulling her into his embrace. Her body was too petite and fragile. Even when she was pressed against his chest, he didn't feel any weight at all. Shaya quietly hugged the warm girl. He lowered his eyes and felt sleepy. T. Chapter 25:33. Without the slightest bit of guilt for occupying a magpie's nest, he was cold-blooded all the way. Deep in the center of the empire's political maelstrom, he forced the royal family to retreat. In addition to his calm and resourceful mind, he also had an extremely cruel and cold heart. Guilt was worthless to him. Shab buried his face in her thick and fragrant hair and finally closed his eyes. During this time, he experienced a rare peace by her side. Even when sleeping, he used to be half asleep and alert. But now, hugging her was like hugging the safest and softest cloud in the world. With a touch, he would fall into a deep and sweet sleep. Shaya couldn't help but curve his lips, revealing a gentle smile. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 70. This favorability increased. The system silently ate the discounted dried fish. Thinking of the side mission, it felt that the increase in favorability was all due to the side mission. The sinister side mission, he disfigured. The system silently took out a fly swatter, flattened the side mission notification, and threw it back. Damn, even the side mission is to show his presence. He already had enough screen time. Should he add a line to the side mission? Then the system finished eating the premonition and continued to pack the Rubik's Cube. The Otaku Craftsman system was still a peaceful day. Wei Bai felt that she needed to change her bed. She slept until her bones fell apart. The bed was just that small. She found it too cramped to sleep alone. That guy Shaya couldn't even straighten his legs. He actually cast a sleeping spell on her while she was sleeping, and then forced himself onto the bed. It was just that small. Don't you blush when you see it? You still have a nerve to force yourself onto the bed. When she woke up in the morning, her whole body was squeezed into the wall by Shaya, and the youth had no sense of shame. His hands and feet tightly bound her. She was like stuffing in a bun, suffocating to death. Wei Bai touched her red nose while bitterly cooking. Her nose was red because she was squeezed out by the wall. Because the bed was too small, she was afraid that she would fall off the bed. Therefore, one side of the bed was placed next to the wall. This was also the reason why it was able to squeeze two people and flatten them without them falling out. Because she was distracted, she didn't pay much attention to the way she cooked. When the broth turned into black, purple, blue, it felt like it had all sorts of colors. Wei Bai frowned. There was only so much meat left at home. If it was thrown away, there would be nothing left to eat. Forget it. She'll just eat bread anyway. Isn't it just a special color? It won't kill anyone. So, Wei Bai put the things on the table. Shaya was at the table, writing something with a pen. Wei Bai glanced over curiously. Shaya gently raised his eyes and picked up a piece of paper. This is a potion list. Although I have lost my memory, I can still remember some things. A good potion list can be sold for money. After all, he couldn't just ask someone to deliver the money directly. Otherwise, there was no way to explain where the gold coins came from. He wanted to wait until the relationship between him and the little which was more stable and profound. Only then did she slowly realize his special identity. Anyway, this was the identity of a substitute. He could continue to pretend. If the little witch couldn't accept his identity at all, then he wouldn't say it and hide it. But he couldn't always let the little witch starve in cold. She couldn't even bear to wear a beautiful dress. Her new dress. She really couldn't bear to wear it even once. His personality was too gentle and easy to bully, and too honest and simple. Chapter 25-34. The Duke, who was used to seeing aristocratic power and luxury, was a little not used to such a fresh and cute style. He also thought it through. He is more of a way to make them rich. Wait until one day he says that he sold a potion list and became a potion master or something. Then come back with a box of gold coins. Change houses, buy servants, and get a house full of jewelry, clothes, and jewelry. What other women have, she should have. The best, the most expensive, and the most beautiful. Should I order a dress in advance from a master tailor in the capital? A dress generally needs to be ordered half a year in advance, and then the finished product can only be obtained 3 or 4 months later. If I order now, I can get it by the end of the year. At that time, he can almost make a fortune with the little witch. Shaya's beautiful fingers casually held the quill, the back of his hand supporting his chin, and his thick eyelashes suppressed the light in his eyes. The youth's contemplative appearance is unbelievably gorgeous. This is the first time he is thinking about how to make himself rich. When the little witch heard his words, she immediately showed an encouraging smile. Shaya can definitely write a good potion list. Write more. When I finish selling the beautifying water, I will go to the pharmacy to promote it for you. Maybe I can sell 1 or 2, If one has 10 iron coins, you can buy some meat. 10 iron coins. The Duke looked at the potion list he wrote. Who dares to buy his potion list with 10 iron coins? He will pull out his sword and cut into 8 pieces. His handwriting is worth more than 10 gold coins. The Duke's thin lips coldly snorted, waiting for him to come back with a box of gold coins. He wants to let the little witch know what a genius is. The childish Duke threw down the quill, then wiped his hands with a handkerchief and prepared to eat. Today's broth, the color is a little strange. Is a new ingredient? And it is also emitting an ominous aura. Sha. The little witch didn't seem to notice the strangeness of the broth. She held the bread and happily said, Xia, after eating, I will take you to a place. Xia held the spoon and tried to drink a mouthful of soup. Where? Wei Wei Bai smiled. Her eyes softened, and her eyes were full of fragmented light. A very beautiful place. Xia couldn't think of anything better. His face was deathly pale. Today was the day his taste buds returned to normal. His sensitive sense of taste was once again crippled. He forced a stiff smile. Okay, I'll go after dinner. Then he looked out the window. The weather is so good today. The little witch couldn't help but turn to look at the weather. Grand Duke Xia, who had always been elegant and calm, and whose every move was painted, picked up the plate in embarrassment and poured the soup into the magic space. He could even hear the soup dripping into the spatial rift. There was a tearing sound of corrosion. Xia, he had just taken a sip. Could his stomach have been corroded as well? Did the little witch accidentally put in some witch poison when she was cooking? Xia put the plate on the table. The little witch looked back and saw his empty plate. Her face was full of admiration. Xia, you eat really fast, and your appetite has also increased. It seems that I have to make more food for you to eat. Xia's face was calm, but his tone was somewhat unstable. I think the amount of food now is just right. Any more, and I won't be able to eat anymore. Wei Wei Bai chewed on the bread and asked with a vague smile, Did my cooking improve? You used to despise my cooking and wouldn't let me cook. Xia was silent for a moment, and then he gave her a gentle smile. I didn't dislike you. I just couldn't bear to let you cook. Now that I've recovered, let me cook in the future. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Holding the bread, she lowered her head and took a bite of it. Her eyes, which were hidden behind the bread, curved with a smile. Xia, you're so nice. The past and the present are very nice, very nice. Xia felt as if his heart was kissed by a sweet cherry. He even felt suffocated by the sweetness and couldn't help but tug at his collar. Of course, he was very nice now. Sooner or later, she would forget the words everything was fine in the past. His goal was to be very nice now. / to facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 25:35. After dinner, Wei Wei Bai cleaned up the table. As if there was something mysterious, she said to Xia, Wait for me. Xia was casting a few healing spells on himself. He felt a little uncomfortable in his stomach and felt better after casting a few spells. Wei Wei Bai had already closed the door. He looked at the door and gently snapped his fingers. A thick stack of parchment paper hidden on the table appeared. More than a dozen birds flew in under his control. They held the parchment paper in their mouths and flew out. This was a pile of recent official business. He could only solve some of them when he was writing the potion list. Then, when the little witch didn't know, he would send the official business back. Seeing that the birds had flown away, Xia calmly turned around and was about to leave the window. The door opened. The time was just right. Xia was just thinking about this when he looked up and froze. Wei Wei Bai carefully walked out with her dress. Her brown hair is smooth and beautiful as hot chocolate hanging behind her. A red hairband was cleverly tied with a soft bow hanging on the left side of her hair. Her bangs were scattered from the hairband. Her fair and delicate face was flushed with a rosy blush. The dress was the one he had chosen. The well-fitting dark red dress flowed down from her slender waist. The soft skirt was like the shape of a flower petal, quietly blooming around her ankles. Although the dress was made of cheap fabric, it couldn't stand up to the trend. It was the most beautiful design in the capital this year. Even if it was made of cheap fabric, The gorgeous effect could be seen. Not to mention that the person wearing it was as beautiful as a pure porcelain doll. Wei Wei Bai held the dress and stood uncomfortably. Seeing that he was looking at her without moving, she couldn't help but blush. "Don't I look good?" The young man's eyelashes moved, and he finally came back to his senses. He seemed to be a little hot and reached out to tug at his collar, which was already a little messy. His beautiful collarbone was exposed. His fingertips accidentally rubbed against his collarbone, and his fingertips were a little white. Then, Shaya slowly walked towards the little witch. The color of his eyes was extremely dense and deep. The purple in his eyes was like a river, giving off a strange and breathtaking feeling. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but stare into his eyes. It was a pair of extremely beautiful eyes. Even if he didn't have any emotions, he could still bewitch people. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her face turned even redder. As if she was shy, she was about to turn her face away. A pair of hands gently held her face. The soft skin of her cheeks in the hands of the youth was as gentle as holding a flower. His eyes flickered as he whispered, "Be good, don't move." Wei Wei Bai obeyed and did not move. But her eyes wandered, as if she couldn't stand being stared at by him like this. Shaya couldn't help but smile, and then his fingers came to her hairband. The soft bow was deftly untied by him. The red hairband passed through the gaps between his fingers. The young man lowered his head seriously. His hair fell under his eyes, and his eyes were incomparably focused. He was even more focused than when he was facing the holy dragon skeleton. His fingertips very delicately circled around a corner of the red ribbon, and then finally tied a small knot. A gorgeous and beautiful rose that could almost be mistaken for a real one appeared in her ears. He made her unprofessional bow into a rose that required skill. Wei Wei Bai was a little curious. She looked up but couldn't see Rose. // Chapter 25:36. Instead, because she raised her head, her lips accidentally touched Shaya's chin. Soft lips, a flash of contact. Shaya's eyes deepened, but his smile became more wanton. "Is this a reward?" Wei Wei Bai quickly took a step back. She didn't answer, worried that he would say something shameful again. She just ran to get the hood and cloak in a panic. Then she wrapped herself up. She couldn't see the dress. Shaya sighed a little regretfully. He must get rich quickly. He just saw the little witch walk out in a beautiful dress. The thought in his mind was, if he changed her into a few beautiful dresses every day, that would be great. Such a cute doll. If he really wanted to hide it, he would show it to himself. Then he would personally change her clothes every day. Of course, this thought was too beastly, so he could only secretly suppress it. He didn't want to scare people. Although the little witch was a witch, but really, she was just unlucky to have a witch mother. She didn't have the qualifications to be a witch. She didn't have the self-awareness of a witch. She couldn't even make a magic potion. She didn't hurt people. She was just a kind little girl. Compared to her, Shaya felt that he was more like a black-hearted male witch. His heart was full of vicious thoughts. Shaya's eyes were deep with a few traces of greed, quietly peeping at the little witch who was packing things. The little witch's side profile was beautiful and pure. She didn't know what terrible disaster she had provoked. Shaya silently blinked his eyes. Finally, he turned his terrifying viper-like eyes into gentleness. His voice was hoarse, and his sandy voice had a few traces of bewitching charm. "Where are we going?" The beautiful place, she said, made him look forward to it. Wei Wei Bai was carrying a small basket, and when she heard the question, her body stiffened. Then she whispered, "We'll know when we get there." Shaya wasn't very curious. After all, he had been everywhere in the capital. Maybe the little witch wanted to go on a date with him. Shaya was very calm, and in a good mood. He reached out and held her soft fingers. His gaze softened. "All right, then I'll follow you." Wei Wei Bai's cheeks were burning. "Do up the buttons first." "What do you look like?" The young man's collar was so messy that most of his shoulders were exposed, and there was also a beautiful section of his collarbone. However, he seemed to be completely unaware of how sinful his appearance was. Shaya reached out and unhurriedly, as if he was going to button it. However, he used too much strength and accidentally pulled the collar even wider. He sighed. What should I do? I can't even tie my collar properly. It seems that my fingers are stiff after I was resurrected. The little witch finally put down the basket. Then she pursed her lips and stared at him. There was no trace of lying in the Duke's eyes. Finally, the little witch sighed in resignation. Lower your head. Shaya smiled and obediently bowed his head. He raised his voice and said, Yes, my master. Master. It was an honorific used by witches and servants to address witches. But his tone didn't seem to be respectful. Instead, it was more like a sigh of satisfaction from a greedy heart. Ancient black copper poles interweaved to form a long fence. The red roses, symbolizing love, bloomed all year round. The small church was somewhat dilapidated. However, it was still very popular, because this was the place where the poor at the bottom of society got married. Shaya was not prepared and was somewhat stunned for a moment. The small church was privately engraved with the magic array of the Church of Light. To facilitate the next reading, you can click on Chapter 2537. However, it had no effect. It was purely for decoration. The church was decorated with a lot of flowers, candles, and some very old bronze objects. The church was run by a down-and-out mage, a very unprofessional mage. It was obvious that he was here to make a living. The main business here was to accept weddings and write magic certificates. Because the mage secretly offered filial piety, the institution in the capital that specialized in registering married couples would also recognize the effect of the certificate. In this day and age, if one got married through formal channels, it would require a considerable amount of money. Some poor people couldn't afford it at all. That was why there was a black market for marriage, which was these small churches. It had something to do with a marriage agency in the capital. Then, they would secretly hold marriage ceremonies for the commoners at a low price. There were also some special groups of people who couldn't go through formal channels and would come here to get married. For example, witches, criminals, or elopement or something. And Wei Wei Bai was obviously a witch. And her relationship with the little baron was also an elopement, or a criminal on the run. All of them. Of course, the marriage partner was the Duke. But she didn't know, but soon she would know, because there were only 2 or 3 hours left before the 24 hours. She didn't think of a way to expose this substitute scam as logically as possible. She was going to be disfigured, destroyed. Important things were repeated 3 times. Wei Wei Bai touched her face. Although it was far from the #1 beauty of her dream, it was really far away, but it was still the #1 product of the system. The pure #1, the girl next door, was also good-looking. Wei Wei Bai thought of the side quest and showed her the disfigured photo. It was 100% burned, plus full marks for the rotten ghost movie special effects. The appearance was uglier than a skeleton. It was a half-rotten skeleton. That disfigured photo was similar to a half-rotten skeleton. In this plane, the main quest was not important. The side quest was the main point. So she touched the black ribbon in the basket. This was the only good thing that witches made. Witches also had to get married. So the ancestors of the witch world did it for their lovers. They also made love ribbons. When they got married, the 2 of them would tie the ribbon. Magic power would maintain the emotions of the 2 of them. If the ribbon changed from black to red, it meant that the 2 of them were in love. The love ribbon did not have any side effects. Furthermore, it wasn't overbearing. It didn't even have the effect of sharing life and death with one another. There was only one effect, and that was to test one's sincerity. Turning red was love. It's up to you whether you want to turn red or not. And the reason why Wei Wei Bai liked this tape was not to test her sincerity. After all, favorability was a test of one's sincerity. She didn't need this. What she wanted was the useless function of the belt. While the ribbon was in effect, the real information of the 2 people would appear. His name, age, gender, and what kind of magic he practiced to what extent. This is a gadget that comes with it. No one took a fancy to him. After all, you're already married. How can you not know all this information? Unless they were here to trick her into marrying him. Therefore, this ribbon was considered a rare item in the witch world. It did not have any side effects. He didn't curse people, but he still had some good things that were useful. However, This thing has been lost for a long time, because the witches had no time to get married. In any case, since they had taken a liking to each other, they would just go for it. This was also the reason why witches had a reputation for being dissolute. // Chapter 2538. There were very few witches who got married, and no one used this ribbon. After a long time, the ribbon had been lost. It was impossible for the original owner's family to have one. She had to spend her life points to buy one in the supermarket. And the supermarket's product was the enhanced version. When the data appeared, it would definitely be high definition and clear. And the price was low. Wei Bai felt that it was worth it to spend money for the first time. To have a reason to use this ribbon, she had to drag Shaya to get married. Shaya was stunned for a while before his thin lips moved slightly. You mean get married? There was even a hint of awkwardness in his tone. This was really the thing that he was the most unfamiliar with. But it wasn't rejection, but a kind of surprise after being at a loss. It came too suddenly, and he was a little at a loss. He couldn't even be the most well-behaved and elegant side. He was more like a little boy who was at a loss. He repeated again, "You mean sign a marriage contract with me and become my wife?" When he said this, the Duke's words were stuttering. Wei Bai lowered her head and was looking for the ribbon in the small basket. She heard Shaya's doubt. She was also stunned, and then her face turned red, and her eyes were incomparably shy. She said in a low voice without confidence, "You said that we would get married after settling down." When Shaya heard this, a basin of cold water was poured over his head. The awkwardness, just now, was all awakened by this sentence. Oh, that X-Man said it. Shaya's anger rushed to his head, and a trace of murderous intent flashed in his rich purple eyes. He was clearly dead. He also told himself that the person beside the little witch now was him. He would win in the end, no matter what despicable means he used. But she said something careless. Still woke him up. After all, the person she wanted to marry was that little baron, not him. The smile on Shaya's lips didn't change, but his aura was much colder and more terrifying. The little witch seemed to have sensed it, and her shy eyes changed, seeming to be puzzled. She was a little hesitant. "Shaya, are you not willing to marry me?" Hearing this, the coldness in Shaya's eyes disappeared. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace. Then he lowered his head and kissed her hood. The young man's tone was languid and affectionate. "Silly, why would I be unwilling? It's just that I can't remember. Every time I hear you mention the past, I feel a little sad that I've forgotten." Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief and immediately promised, "If you feel bad, I won't talk about the past anymore. Anyway, we have a future." Shaya smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "Yes, we still have a future. So let the past disappear." As long as she stayed with him, he would dilute the past. After living together for a long time, her life was filled with traces of him. Nibbling away at a person's feelings was actually a very simple matter. Just like her, she clearly did not seduce him. She simply took care of him as her lover. His life and feelings had been eaten away by her step by step in such a simple manner. When he realized that something was wrong, he couldn't even control his heartbeat. The Duke had never been a conflicted person. Instead, he was an extremely selfish person. In an instant, he made the best and most despicable decision. "Although I've forgotten, my love for you has not changed. Of course, I'm happy to fulfill my promise and marry you." // To facilitate your next reading, you can click on at the bottom to record this reading record. Chapter 2539. Although the small church was a little simple, but as long as one pressed their fingerprint and wrote their name on the marriage contract, then the marriage contract could be recognized. This was also the result of the imperial institutions turning a blind eye. After all, they couldn't let the poor really not be able to get married. That would not be illegitimate children everywhere. This was also not good for the empire's rule. The mage in charge of the wedding was a wood element beginner mage. The wedding process was very simple. The marriage contract was 15 iron coins. If a mage was needed to preside over a romantic vow to each other for life, it would cost 3 more iron coins. And if they didn't prepare for the wedding, the two of them would wrap the ribbons around each other's wrists. They could also be bought here. 1 iron coin per ribbon. Everything was clear and simple. Wei Wei Bai took off her hood and put on a chair in the church. The mage put the marriage contract on the table and was slightly stunned when he saw Wei Wei Bai, who had just taken off her cloak. He originally thought that seeing the youth was stunning enough. The girl who was matched with him was also too beautiful and pure. Two people. One was the gorgeous and deep fire of hell. One was as pure and delicate as a snowflake. It was simply two extremes of beauty. Suddenly, the mage felt a murderous gaze. He looked up and saw the youth named Shaya. Although he was smiling, his eyes were indescribably treacherous and cold, as if he dared to look at the girl again. It was as if he would kill him. The mage was terrified. He could do this line of work, and his intuition was very strong. His intuition told him that this youth was not to be trifled with, and the mage could see the level of the mage who was weaker than him. He was considered to be more powerful among the beginner mages. But when he wanted to see the level of the youth's magic clearly, he could only see an incomparably deep darkness. It was so cold that it made his hair stand on end. Maybe it wasn't a pair of poor people, but criminals who couldn't pass the test of formal institutions. Although the mage thought a lot, but he didn't show the slightest difference. After all, the more you know, the faster you die. Wei Wei Bai didn't beat around the bush and directly took out the ribbon from the basket. We don't need to buy a wedding ribbon. We can save an iron coin. She held a black ribbon in her fair fingers. The pure white and black looked exceptionally beautiful under the light. Ribbons were tied around the wrists of both parties. This was the wedding ceremony. The two of them tied the ribbon and then wrote their names on the marriage certificate and pressed their fingerprints. This meant that they would have to spend the rest of their lives together. Ribbons were even more indispensable. Regardless of whether it was a commoner or a noble, the wedding was grand or simple. This program had never changed since ancient times. Therefore, when Wei Wei Bai took out the ribbon naturally and happily, no one was surprised or suspicious. Shaya's eyes fell on the ribbon as if he was observing something. But no matter how he looked at it, it was just an ordinary ribbon. Was it just because it was black in color? After all, most people would buy white or pink ribbons for their weddings. A light-colored ribbon, romantic and beautiful. It was rare to see a black ribbon. But then he thought that the little witch might have just casually found it at home. Other than saving money, there was nothing else in her little head. That strange discomfort was ignored because of the joy of getting married. Wei Wei Bai looked at the ribbon in her hand. Her smile was still cute and pure. Chapter 2540. It was a supermarket product with an anti-detection effect. No matter how powerful a person was, they would find it to be an ordinary ribbon. After all, Shaya wasn't a small baron, but the famous Rose Duke. She didn't know how powerful his magic was. Not to be disfigured, she had really racked her brains. She was courting death. Speaking of it, there were tears. Wei Wei Bai could only smile in the wind and cry silently, along with her beautiful face. She had ruthlessly trampled on the main mission. Favorability, goodbye. Side quest, little bastard, you're fucking ruthless. The mage coughed softly. Okay, please tie the ribbon, and then prepare to take the oath, sign, and put your fingerprint. It saved the money for the ribbon, but it didn't save 3 iron coins for the oath. Shaya reached out and took the ribbon in her hand. He casually rubbed his fingers against the black ribbon. There were a few wisps of witch's aura, but it was very faint. There shouldn't be anything strange. In fact, this was his instinctive action. He would take a few more glances at anything normal. Being suspicious and cautious had always been his strength. Shad didn't really examine it carefully, because the ribbon didn't have any offensive magic attached. Then, even if there were other small differences, he didn't need to care too much. His eyelashes drooped slightly, and in his beautiful eyes, the purple light was clear and clean. Almost reverently, he held the little witch's fingers, hooked his fingertips, and slowly interlaced his 10 fingers together, holding it tightly. Then, the youth smiled and wrapped the ribbon around both of their hands. The soft black ribbon wrapped around the wrists, until it wrapped around both of their fingers. When tying the knot, Shaya naturally lowered his head, bit a corner of the ribbon, and tied a dead knot with one hand. When the youth lowered his head, his white back was slightly exposed under the collar, and his beautiful neck was incomparably elegant. As if on purpose, his thin lips softly rubbed against the inside of her delicate wrist. A gentle, ambiguous, and unusually domineering kiss was branded just like that. Wei Wei Bai's wrist trembled, and she bit her lip without saying anything. Shaya raised his eyebrows and smiled even more happily. Then, he stood up straight, as if he was ordering a servant. Begin the oath. A vow was nothing more than a promise that the two of them would live hand in hand for the rest of their lives, be it illness or happiness. In the past, when Shaya heard this, he felt that it was stupid. But when he heard, as the gods bear witness, under the glory, Wei Wei Aaron, are you willing to regard the man by your side as your only support, your lover, your husband, and your love will never diminish? As for the girl beside him, her smile was incomparably sweet. She looked up at him. Her eyes were bright, and her tone was steady and solemn. Of course, I'm willing. At this moment, Shaya's mind shook violently, and even his breathing stopped. Wei Wei Bai's fingers were wrapped in his palm. This heavy warmth made the Duke feel an indescribable sense of beauty. Shaya lowered his eyes filled with a pure smile. He heard the magician ask, Shaya West, are you willing to? Before he could finish speaking, he couldn't help but blurt out, I'm willing. Originally, he still had a dark and sinister plan in his heart, thinking of suppressing her in his hands. Marriage could also be used as a tool to bind people. But at this moment, there was no trace of reluctance in his heart. On the contrary, he really felt that this was the only wedding in his life. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Chapter 2541. And when they said yes, the color of the ribbon began to change. The ribbon was testing the man's love. The black ribbon gradually turned from white to pink. The mage opened the marriage contract and handed over the quill. Come, sign your name and press your fingerprint. The marriage contract will take effect tomorrow. After all, after signing the name, they still had to take it to a formal organization to register. He had this layer of relationship with her. The people in the organization would not check the name of the person on the marriage contract and would directly stamp it. Shaya took the quill and signed his name. Although the little baron was also called Shaya, his surname was Weiss. After all, it was just a very small, very distant branch of the Rose family. It had been too long, and in addition to the taboo, he did not dare to use West's name to mess around. So he changed it to Weiss. The little witch did not find anything wrong with the mage's name, because the mage's accent was very vague. In addition, West was very close to Weiss, so it was even harder to discover. But the spelling on the marriage contract was his real name when he signed for the mage to make the marriage contract. The little witch knew at a glance that the surname was wrong. Shaya's expression did not change. After signing the name and pressing his fingerprint, with a move of his fingertips, the spelling of West became Weiss. This was a trick. It would soon disappear and return to its original name. It would be enough to hide it from the little witch. Shaya smiled and pushed the marriage contract in front of the little witch. Wei Wei, sign it. Wei Wei Bai took the quill and wrote Wei Wei Aaron. Although she was also called Wei Wei in this plane, her surname was not Bai. Her surname was Aaron. Wei Wei Bai deliberately wrote slowly, still thinking about when the ribbon would take effect. If it did not take effect, she would be disfigured. Disfigured. She still had to rely on the wedding to expose the true face of Liar Xia. She had never seen such a thick-skinned person. Normally, when she recognized her lover, wouldn't they directly say their true identity and say that they had recognized the wrong person? He actually shamelessly admitted it. What was even more shameless was that he pretended to have amnesia. At that time, the favorable impression points weren't that high, right? Could it be that he didn't expose her because he thought that it was fun for her to say that she loved him every day? When White Monkey reached the last stroke of his signature, his wrist suddenly burned. She immediately lowered her head. The ribbon actually turned into a peach pink color. 75 favorable impression points. It was actually pink. Could it be that it was bright red? Before Wei Wei Bai can continue to think deeply, the red light falls on the marriage contract. The two people's information slowly turned from nothingness to a red glow, distorting the two people's specific information. Wei Wei Aaron, which civilian, female, magic abilities, almost none. Wei Wei Bai, he might as well just say that he didn't have any magic ability. Close to none. This was a blatant mockery. When Shaya saw the information appear, his pupils shrank. He suddenly knew where the strange feeling that flashed through his mind came from. The witch's ribbon, an almost lost wedding item. There was no offensive nature, no curse, and no malicious aura. Its only function was to test one's love when they got married, as well as to display the real data. He stretched out his hand, and a golden magic light appeared on his fingertips. When he wanted to suppress the ribbon's power, but it was too late. Shaya West, holy archmage, aristocrat, male, magic abilities, unable to calculate, unfathomable. Wei Wei Bai's thumb was already stained with red mud, and she was just about to press her fingerprint. /T. Chapter 2542. But when she saw the information that appeared out of thin air, her expression was blank for a moment, as if she felt that something was wrong. The next moment, the young man's fingertips had already shattered the red light. The information distorted and disappeared. Wei Wei Bai was still looking at the place where the information appeared. Her lips trembled, and her thumb was almost at the signature. But at this moment, she looked at the young man beside her in disbelief. Shaya's face was gloomy, his thin lips were tightly pursed, and his eyes were extremely sinister. But when Wei Wei Bai looked over, his expression changed instantly. He smiled gently. "What's wrong, Wei Wei? Put your fingerprint." After saying that, he reached out to hold her finger and help her put down the fingerprint. But Wei Wei Bai's fingertips trembled violently. She took a step back. Their other hands were tightly entwined with each other. When she stepped back, she almost fell. Wei Wei Bai repeated curiously, "Shaya West." Shaya's purple eyes stared at her without moving. His thin lips curled up, and the arc was extremely gentle. His tone was calm and had a hint of confusion. Wei 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 originally wanted to directly erupt with a mistaken identity. But when she saw Shaya's pure, clear, and confused eyes, her acting skills were stuck before she could even take over. When the information appeared just now, it disappeared too quickly. Shaya made it clear that he wanted to muddle through the matter of his name. She was adamant that she had mistaken him for someone else. She was too sure. After all, the main mission still needed to be done. She had mistaken him for someone else and was exposed. In the future, there would still be a chance for them to get to know each other again and increase their favorability. But if she was suspected, it was all a scheme. Then it would be an awkward meeting between the two actors. In the future, when they see each other, they would be so embarrassed that they would want to die together. Don't even think about favorability. Seeing the struggle on Wei Wei Bai's face, Shaya's eyes were filled with confusion. Shaya's eyes were deep and gorgeous, and a trace of sad innocence appeared on his fair face. "Do you suddenly regret marrying me?" Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled as if she was hesitating. Shaya leaned forward and touched the back of her hand with her fingers that weren't wrapped around the ribbon. He did not exert any force. It was as if he was coaxing a small, scared animal. The young man unhurriedly placed his chin gently on her thin shoulder. He said softly, "Wei Wei, don't you want to be in love with me for the rest of our lives? My little Aaron." There was such a detail in the information. That dead Baron liked to call her little Aaron. This was because when they first met, she had only said her surname. He didn't tell him his name. The Baron could only call her Miss Aaron, and later they became intimate. He called her Little Aaron. This was the most intimate form of address between them. Shaya felt really jealous, and he had no choice but to use this matter to make her lower her guard. The Duke had always been unscrupulous. His tone was affectionate, but in a place where Wei Wei Bai couldn't see, his eyes were terrifyingly cold. The twisted jealousy made his purple eyes seem even colder and sharper. He could only endure the unspeakable grievance. Wei Wei Bai felt that the plan to shed all pretense of cordiality was stuck. Even the details were out. She had met a veteran actor and was caught off guard. She fell into a deep dilemma. Should she disfigure herself or destroy the main mission? /T. Chapter 2543. Then she told the system about this problem. The system was also silent for a moment. Then it flipped through the supermarket. The lucky box is on sale. Do you want to buy it? Even if it was the same product, the price would be different when it was on sale. The discount this time was quite big. It was very cost-effective. By Weiwei, the lucky box is that thing where the luck value can't be grasped at all. Do you want to buy it? Shea's deep voice sounded again. His breath was seductive, and his fingertips rubbed the back of her hand. The gentle young man's posture was so humble. If you regret it, I'm fine. The information that appeared just now definitely didn't match with the dead Baron, because even if the Baron studied light magic, but he was definitely not a divine archmage. The Empire's only divine archmage. Only him. No matter how bad the little witch's magic was, she still had basic common sense. So what Shea said and did now was to confuse her. They were all trying to confuse her judgment. They didn't mention any information at all. They just insisted that she regretted it. It made her doubt if she had seen wrongly. Weiwei Bai felt that she had really met an expert. She said in annoyance, buy it. She had to try the lucky box. Otherwise, she would have directly asked Shea about the information. There wasn't enough time, because Shea had made it clear that he wouldn't admit it, and the information appeared in a short period of time. Who could be sure that she wasn't mistaken? This doubt could involve her disfigurement. She couldn't expose his identity. After making a wish, she casually opened the lucky box. Weiwei Bai thought in despair, at the last minute before her disfigurement. She directly fell out with him, pointed at his nose, and called him a liar. After all, disfigurement was much more serious than no favorability. Just as she was gathering her strength and preparing to fall out with him, suddenly, the sound of horse hooves came from outside the church. It was like the violent sound of cavalry on an expedition. The young man who was coaxing the little which had a cold gaze. When he heard the noise, he turned his eyes and looked outside the church. Outside the simple church, the cavalry surrounded the church. The roses were trampled all over the ground. Weiwei Bai woke up from her daze and looked outside as well. A row of guards rushed in through the open door. Then, a man wearing a saint's white robe slowly walked over. It was Prince Pellegrini. Acting like a pompous actor, he shouted, "Ah, Duke Wester, why are you here? I heard there was a witch here, so I immediately came to capture her." Shea froze. His identity was suddenly exposed. Even if he was an experienced and astute person, he still couldn't do anything. He was momentarily stunned as well. Weiwei Bai and the system were speechless. This exposure came without hesitation and without any hesitation. It was neat and tidy. This was the first time he had experienced the effect of not being discounted at all. She and the system were moved to tears of joy. So this was the taste of luck. This was the first time Su Tong, who had always been an unlucky duo, had bought such a good discount product. Shaya stiffened for a few seconds before finally leaving Weiwei Bai. He stood up straight gracefully, his every movement languid and graceful. The little witch, who had already been fooled, now had a look of shock on her face. She looked at him strangely, panic in her eyes, as if she couldn't understand what was going on. When the information appeared, she was just puzzled. But now, fear and panic appeared on her face. If it was someone else, / to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 2544. How could he fool her? He must have mistaken her for someone else. But at this moment, it was Pigri who came. Whether or not he was here to catch the witch, he was here for him. He just wanted to continue lying. This prince who came here to cause trouble would not cooperate. Shaya's eyes were a little blurred and suppressed. He seemed to be thinking about something. His bandaged fingers pinched her hand harder. She even pinched her fingers until they hurt. Weiwei Bai was frightened, and her body trembled violently. She stared at his face strangely. Then, She seemed to be recalling something. Her face was blank and full of disbelief. In the end, it was as if she wanted to know the truth, but didn't dare to reveal it. Her hand, which was hurting from his pinch, couldn't stop trembling. She trembled and finally said, You are not. It was so difficult to say that she had mistaken him for someone else. Her voice was choked and almost suppressed in her throat. It was as if she was sobbing. Shea could hear her voice close to tears. He seemed to be helpless and could only sigh in the end. Then, Grand Duke Shea looked down at her gently. He stretched out his fingertips and gently touched her eyes that she was afraid of. His round and curved fingernails touched her eyelashes and eyelids. It was so gentle that it was as if he wanted to eat her. Don't be afraid. It's just a bug that's disturbing us. Why are you so afraid? Don't you still have me? Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled, and she wanted to retreat. But she found that he was holding her wrist tightly. It was a gentle feeling, but there was a chilling aura oppressing her. Xia, who had pretended to be gentle for too long, revealed a smile at this moment, although there was still a trace of gentleness in it. But it was unusually strange and gorgeous. It wasn't as sunny and beautiful as the little baron in her heart. Wei Wei Bai seemed to wake up from a deep dream. She finally gasped softly. You are not Xia. Who are you? There was no gentleness in Xia's smile. Instead, there was a hint of laziness and indifference, an elegant and casual posture. It was full of the temperament of the rotten and extravagant aristocratic world. His voice was low and hoarse, hiding a bottomless darkness. Who else could I be? Am I not your lover? Wei Wei Bai looked at the indifferent progress bar. Time was almost up. He didn't have time to talk nonsense with Xia. The panic in her eyes was replaced by clear anger. Your name is Sheawist. You are a member of the Rose family, not him. She finally stopped lying to herself. Instead, he mustered up the courage to reveal everything. The weak and easily bullied little witch was actually a little fool who dared to die together with others when she was determined. Shea felt that everything was screwed up. He lazily tugged at his collar. In fact, he didn't like civilian clothes that were too restrictive, especially around the collar. If it was too tight, it would always be a little uncomfortable. The Duke, who was used to being carefree, was very calm at this moment. He tugged at his collar, and a few buttons flew out from his fingers. He seemed indifferent. Yeah, I'm not your Shia. He had thought that it would be a long time before the truth would be revealed. He had thought of a lot of ways to appease the little witch. After all, at that time, their relationship would definitely be deep. He could at least replace that shabby little baron. He had revealed the truth so early. Sure enough, the little witch was going to run away. Slash. Chapter 2545. Under Xia's long and narrow eyelashes, a pair of indifferent purple eyes were frozen like ice. But he was still smiling. His smile was beautiful, but also scary, especially when he noticed that Wei Wei Bai's fingers were desperately trying to break free from the ribbon. Pigri brought a group of people to see this scene. They said they were here to catch the witch, but in fact, they noticed that Rose Duke was here. Out of conspiracy theories, Pigri brought people here to see if Xia was up to something big. In the end, this scene left them at a loss. The conspiracy didn't happen, and Xia West didn't die. He couldn't help but look at Wei Wei Bai. This scene looked like a wedding, but it was especially absurd because Grand Duke West was getting married in this damn place. It was obviously illogical, but just as his eyes fell on Wei Wei Bai, before he could see clearly, the scene in front of him had changed. Space transfer magic, Pigri and all the guards who followed were teleported away in an instant. Pigri looked at the huge beast in front of him, as well as all kinds of terrifying monsters. This was the Barren Land. Legend has it that this was a training ground with a slim chance of survival. A cold wind blew, and Prince Pigri looked at a pile of magic monsters with drooling, silently petrified. And Wei Wei Bai just blinked. Everyone in the church disappeared, including the mage who officiated at the wedding. The group of people just now was better. Although the atmosphere was bad, at least it was lively. Now, it was a dilapidated church, just like a scary haunted house. There was also a ghostly and gorgeous young man beside her. It was a very scary atmosphere of murder and burial. So her fingers exerted more force, broke free from his fingers, and also pulled apart the ribbon that tied the two of them together. A peach red ribbon. The moment she left, it turned into an ominous black color, hanging on Shaya's wrist. Wei Wei Bai was almost at a loss as she ran away from him. She stepped back and bumped into the table. The marriage certificate on it also shook. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale, and her breathing was disorderly. She covered her mouth with her fingers. "So you've been lying to me?" Shaya's thin lips were still curved into a smile, but he didn't look happy at all. His gaze moved down and saw the lonely ribbon on his wrist. His fingertips almost turned white as he gripped the ribbon. Then he tilted his head and said gently, "Are you talking about amnesia, or the fact that I'm not your lover?" In fact, the small mission was already completed. The mission's progress bar. Wei Wei Bai didn't expect that the atmosphere would become so strange and stiff. It was simply impossible. He couldn't possibly say that he had mistaken her for someone else just now and then say that he wanted to make up with her now. Several plans flashed through by Wei Wei's mind, but none were suitable for the current atmosphere. So she thought, quickly, 2. I'll think of a way to reconcile with you in the future. Shaya. Shaya slowly stepped forward. She obviously wanted to get out of here. So she looked to the left, where the door to the church was. Shaya stretched out his fingers and snapped them hard. The crisp sound of fingers rang out. In the silent church, the door creaked. Then, with a bang, the door was tightly shut. The sunlight was also shut out. In the dark church, the gorgeous and strange boy stood quietly. / to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 25:46. His collar was open, and the pale skin of his neck was exposed. Exquisite and dangerous. It was as gentle as a discussion. His smile was beautiful, and his deep eyes were full of twisted passion. So what if you mistook me for someone else? I don't blame you. Don't we have a good life? You can treat me as him. I don't care at all. Shaya smiled. I really don't mind, little Aaron. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she said almost acidly, "Don't call me that." From the panic after mistaking him for someone else to the anger after he woke up, Shaya saw it all. There was a sharp pain in his chest. It was a pain that was more severe than any of the attacks he had received before. It was almost unbearable. He thought that the standing game was fun. In the end, it ended up in such a miserable state, which was something he had never expected. He lowered his head in discomfort. His messy hair covered his eyes. His fingers were still clutching that band tightly. Between the strands of hair, he saw the girl covering her mouth. Her eyes were full of disbelief and shock, as well as tears of fear. The joy of marrying him just now was gone. Almost pleading, Shaya said softly, "Wei Wei, you mistook me for someone else in the beginning." This was her fault, wasn't it? He had never said that he was that Shaya. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She seemed to think that what he said made sense. Shaya tried to explain. "I did lose my memory. I forgot who I was. And I'm called Shaya. I only believed you when you told me that we were in love." Wei Wei Bai, oh my God. She tricked him. Now, it was his turn to trick him. The tricks of the drama queen were really like a Russian doll. One trick after another. If the information hadn't appeared, she would have been fooled. He was in the state of a necromancer, not a real dead person. That medicine didn't work on him at all. Amnesia my foot. It was the drama queen who was watching the show from beginning to end. Wei Wei Bai frowned. After all, there was still the main mission. She had to take the favorability into consideration. If he hurt her too badly, he wouldn't be able to increase her favorability in the future. Wei Wei Bai was considering if she should pretend to forgive him. Of course, marriage was out of the question. The substitute quest was blocked. She still had to love that little bastard baron. Therefore, he decided to soften his attitude and deal with it. Wei Wei Bai wept as she considered the gains and losses. Then, the panic in her eyes lessened. She seemed to have been convinced. Shaya's voice became softer. "I slowly remembered who I was later, but I already like you. I like you very much." The way the young man admitted defeat made him look like a harmless child. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a hint of struggle before she finally released her lips. Then, she forced herself to remain calm. It's my fault. I thought that your personality had changed greatly because of the magic potion. I didn't expect that I had mistaken you for someone else. Shaya calmly gazed at her and did not speak. Wei Wei Bai forced an ugly smile. I think we should all calm down and leave this place first. After that, she straightened her body and walked forward as if her legs were weak. When she passed by the young man, Shaya suddenly shouted softly, Wei Wei, can't you treat me as him? These words were so humble that it made her heart ache. Wei Wei Bai was about to nod, but she was worried that the side quest would come out and cause trouble. After thinking about it, she shook her head. I'm sorry, the Shaya in my heart is not you. / Chapter 25:47. After saying that, the progress bar of the side mission actually moved forward a little. Why did the progress bar move by itself? Although it was a good thing, what did she say just now? That was why it moved. If she could complete the side mission as soon as possible, she would of course have to think more about how to complete it. Wei Wei Bai thought as she took a step forward. The completely unguarded girl's wrist was suddenly grabbed by someone. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath. This strength was about to crush her bones. She quickly turned around, but she saw Shaya lowering his head, his fair and slender fingers clasped on her wrist, and his other hand was holding a ribbon, which he was unhurriedly wrapping around her wrist. Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. What are you doing? Could it be that he flew into a rage out of humiliation and planned to retaliate by beating her up or hanging her up? Shaya gently raised his eyes and said with a smile, Getting married, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai, this atmosphere was obviously not suitable for marriage. Her fingers couldn't help but exert force, wanting to struggle. But in the next moment, she saw the youth in front of her. His gentle face changed. The sinister darkness in his eyes was revealed just like that, as terrifying as a beast opening its fangs. There was never a gentle and amiable duke. Cruelty and coldness were the true colors of this empire's dictator. He played with her and accidentally took it seriously. So even if she found out the truth and wanted to leave, sorry, it was too late. He didn't stop. How could she dare to leave? Shaya raised his eyes, his purple eyes containing a frightening smile. You want to leave just because you recognize the wrong person? His tone was still gentle, but his eyes were dark and burning. Since you don't want me as a substitute, then I won't play this childish game with you. From now on, listen to me. After saying that, he asked very politely, Okay. While asking with a smile, the black ribbon in his hand became abnormally long because of magic. He pulled her into his arms. The girl's soft body was bound by the black ribbon. Her hands that wanted to struggle were tightly bound. Her feet that wanted to escape were also tripped by the ribbon. By the time Wei Wei Bai reacted, she was already pressed on the table by Shaya. Her body was like a cocoon, unable to move. The youth held her hands with one hand and leaned down unhurriedly, his warm chest like a terrible cage, enveloping her. His eyes were full of affection. There is still the last step of the wedding. Be good. Let's imprint. There was only the last step. With just one handprint, their wedding was complete. Wei Wei Bai was dumbfounded. This was obviously a dark change. This was the experienced Wei Wei Bai. Also felt she had met. Didn't he say that he would take it slow and steady? From the beautiful farming and sweet literature, it flew straight to the dark horror film. It was clear that the side quest did not intend to let her off easily. It always appeared when she was at her most desperate. Tell her, don't worry, there is still more to spare. Ding, the substitute side mission is forcibly activated. You are my white moonlight. You are my mosquito blood. Before the completion of the side mission, you must let the Grand Duke of Mosquito Blood know at all times that the person you love is the little Baron of the white moonlight, and not him, the substitute. Let every substitute experience the despair and pain of being a substitute. A substitute has no future. A substitute has no love. This is the mission of the substitute mission. Wei Wei Bai, / you can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like, Chapter 2548. She finally knew why the side mission was called a substitute mission. She made up a fake case of mistaken identity. The side mission took advantage of her and turned the fake into the real thing. Not only that, it made her cry until the end of the story. What was the worst about the substitute story? It was just that no one loved a substitute. Side mission. No one loves, no one loves, no one loves. Huh. The system calmly finished the side mission and threw it into the trash can. Way by, on the long mahogany table, scattered quills and red mud prints. The young girl's hairband had already come loose, and the dark red dress was like a blooming red rose that was about to wither. Her eyes were still trembling, as if she didn't understand what was about to happen to her. Her bound hands were dragged little by little towards the marriage contract. The red mark on her thumb had been rubbed away a lot. Shad didn't care much. The curve of his smile was elegant, but his words were casual with suppressed firmness. When we are together in the future, you don't have to worry about life. I'm not like some useless man who will make you suffer. He said until here. He couldn't help but laugh and whisper, "Isn't that right, little Aaron?" A jealous boy, no matter how beautiful he was scary. Wei Bai looked at the mosquito blood on Xiaya and hardened her heart. She used all her strength to break free from his fingers. Then she used the hand tied with the ribbon to hit his face. Xia gently raised his hand and blocked her fingers. Then he clenched his fist. Wei Bai's face turned pale. Her eyes had calmed down. "Let go of me, are you crazy? I mistook you for someone else. I don't know you at all." Completely rejected. It was more cruel than any words. Even if she said she didn't love him, didn't like him. In the end, she didn't know him. Xiaya felt that his heart was too gentle to her. But she still shouted recklessly, "I don't know who you are. I mistook you for someone else. I'm sorry. Stop this ridiculous behavior. The wedding is even more impossible. The person I love is not you." That was what she said. She was so ruthless that she deserved to be a vicious witch. She gritted her teeth and said, "The person I love is Shavis. I'm sorry. So can you let me go now?" She seemed to think that all she had to do was say that she recognized the wrong person. A careless apology. He would be able to resolve his own calamity. Xiaya finally sighed and lowered his eyes. He wanted to restrain himself and even stretched out his fingers to smooth his hair. Her honey-colored curly hair ran messily through his fingers. His fingers gripped so hard that they turned white. Then his fingers slid down and came to his eyes. Through the gap between his fingertips, his purple eyes revealed a terrifying malevolence. Finally, the sharp pain in his heart turned into monstrous madness. It made his reason disappear. Wei Bai looked at the horizontal bar above her head and moved again. It turned out that he only needed to emphasize the identity of Xiaya's substitute. In addition, he said a few fictional confessions of love from the white moonlight. Only then would the index rise. Wei Bai was just about to shout a few more words. "Bai Yue Guang is my love." Her cheeks were suddenly pinched, and her body was fiercely pressed down. Before she could struggle, her thumb was already firmly dragged to the marriage contract. He leaned over and touched her lips with his. He whispered softly, "Okay, stop messing around. I'm angry." / to facilitate your next reading, you can click on. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.